Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mount Laurel Township Planning Board regular meeting of October 14, 2021. The meeting is now called to order. Notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with the law by posting a copy of the annual notice on the bulletin boards at Town Hall, filing a copy of the annual notice with the clerk of the Township of Mount Laurel and the clerk's office of the township, and emailing a copy of the annual notice to the Burlington County Times, the Courier Post, and the Central Record. All of these postings, filings, and emails took place on the 20th of January, 2021. At this time, I would ask that everyone please turn off all cell phones except for emergency personnel, but public is muted at this time. So at this time, I would ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I would ask Trish, the board secretary, to take the roll.
Chairwoman Conti,
Present.
Vice Chair Cassidy,
Present.
Mayor Steglich,
Present.
Councilwoman Janjua,
Present.
Township Manager Tomchak,
Present.
Mr. Pizzo,
Present.
Mr. Pfeiffer,
Present.
Mr. Nyack,
Present.
and Mr. Bafke.
Present.
Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome.
At this time, the next thing on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. Does anybody from the board have any comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the 9th regular minute meetings of September 9th, 2021.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Township Manager Tomachek. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Mr. Bathke. Trish, will you call the roll?
Township Manager Tomchak,
Aye.
Mr. Bafke,
Aye.
Mr. Nyack,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Mr. Pizzo,
Abstain.
Councilwoman Janjua,
Aye.
Mayor Steglich,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cassidy,
Abstain.
and Chairwoman Conti.
Aye, so moved. The next item on the agenda is under discussion items. It's for open space improvements. And I'm going to turn this over to the Township Manager, Meredith Tomchek.
Hi, thank you, board. Frank Harris, our open space engineer from Panoni, is also on the call. I just want to run down 3 projects that the township has that they'll be upcoming in case there's any questions. The first project is the Laurel House, which is previously known as Monastery. That building is being converted into a new recreational center. It will have 6 conference rooms on the 2nd story, with the 2 conference rooms on the 1st story, with an elevator that's going to be added. But due to that additional usage that's going to be in the building, we are proposing additional parking at the Laurel House. We're also going to be installing some volleyball courts because there's a need for additional volleyball courts within the township. So in order to have enough parking, we would need to do additional parking. The second project is the Church Street Laurel Acres parking entrance. Everybody's very familiar with how popular Laurel Acres Park is, and that you can't make a left and a right out of the park at the same time. So this would be widening the exit so that you could make a left and a right at the same time. And lastly, the last project is the Marin Highway turf field. This is a property the township owns that we do owe there's some cleanup on there. There is some arsenic on this property. So when pricing how much it would be to cover the arsenic with topsoil, it made sense. One of the allowable uses is to turf over top of it. So there will is part of the cleanup. So we figured if we were going to spend money, let's spend it, so that we could get a use out of the cleanup. So Marin Highway is proposed to have a turf field. We've filed, Frank helped me out here, in front of the county planning board for the Marin Highway turf field, and we've agreed to meet all of their conditions that they have recommended.
That is correct.
And they've also reviewed, correct, the Laurel Acres entrance, correct, Frank?
They have not, we haven't received any response back from that yet. They do
We
have a
did-
meeting October 26th.
Hmm.
I didn't see it.
So, if the board has any questions, this was just an update of some of the projects that the township will have going on in the town.
Meredith, where will the volleyball courts at the monastery be?
So they're gonna be kind of in the rear part of it, off to
So
the side.
behind the building or off to the side by the garage?
We're trying to not cut down as many trees as possible. So it would be to the open space section, correct, Frank? Wouldn't you
Yeah, if
consider
I
that?
could-
Yeah. Can you share your screen, Frank?
Yeah, if I could comment, if you pull, no, I can't.
Okay.
I can't. Maybe I can
So if you-
explain
if
it.
you pull
If you
yeah,
pull into the monastery property,
Mhm.
and the monastery's to your right, continue through the parking lot,
Mhm.
and then the open field that you come to, right
That's
there.
right in front of you as you're pulling
Mhm.
through the parking lot?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
over by
yes,
the, over
yep.
by the garage, that,
Yep.
that piece of land by the garage.
That's correct. Yeah, the garage will be to the right. The open field when you pull through the parking lot.
Okay,
And Lisa, we're gonna add some like grills and some benches and some tables in addition to the volleyball courts in case, the monastery, it's gonna be pretty nice upstairs. So in case people want to rent it for birthday parties or whatnot, and they want to go outside and play with the kids, and then go back inside. So
okay. I just wanted to clarify for the public.
Mhm.
Meredith, will this, are you looking for public comment at this time, or will this go to a council meeting where the public can comment there?
it does not go to a council meeting. It's only required to come in front of the planning board.
Okay, so predicated on that, John, do I have to open it up to the public or just to the board?
No, it's actually just to the board.
Just to the board, okay.
Meredith,
And-
this is
yeah,
coming to
sure.
the board for review and recommendation, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so the purpose of the application tonight is, under the land use law, for the expenditure of public funds, the idea is that the planning board should review the expenditure and, recommend the expenditure to the township. That's what you're doing tonight. That's why we're looking at it.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for Meredith or for Frank?
And Meredith, it's Mike. I had one question
Sure.
related to the Laurel Acres
Sure.
entrance. So the township recently did a great thing where they added the ability to walk for the
Mhm.
people that live close to that area, right? You always
Yes.
had to walk in on the drive, on the cartway, right? So the township recently just put a nice walkway from Church Street into the park, right? So for people that live close to there,
Mhm.
they don't have to walk in the drive aisle. Is the exit, the additional exit lane where the widening, is it going to be like on the north side? Or let me restate it. That's not going to be affected, right? I mean,
That's not going to
anything-
be affected because it's
Okay.
the left and the right going out. So it's the other
Okay.
side.
So it's the other side. So the expansion is going to be on the other side.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And there's that additional parking as well that's being added up front.
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Where they
additional
normally,
parking.
where they normally park cars on the grass during big events,
Mm-hmm.
towards the front of the park, that'll now be paved parking as well. The parking will be expanded
Thank you.
on the plans that were submitted to the board. Does other board members have questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question, Meredith. On the Laurel House, you mentioned an elevator being
Yes.
installed.
Yes.
What's driving that? It's 2 stories.
Because it's 2 stories to be ADA compliant. There's no elevators. So somebody that's handicapped would not be able to get to the second story. So to make it ADA compliant, we're installing the elevator.
Any other questions or comments from the board for Meredith or Frank? Okay, seeing none. John, what, do we vote on something or?
Yes, the vote would be for, as Jay said, for the review and the recommendation of the proposed
To
improvements.
council. Okay. Okay, so based on that, do I have a motion to review and recommend this to council?
If I may, Madam Chair, you're basically, you've already reviewed it. That's what we've done.
So we're
So
just recommending this go to council.
the expenditure of the public funds, yes.
So do I have a motion to recommend this to go to council?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to recommend.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cassidy. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a second for Mayor Stegler. Trish, will you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Cassidy,
Yes.
Mayor Stegler,
Yes.
Mr. Basky,
Aye.
Mr. Nyack,
Aye.
Mr. Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Mr. Pizzo,
Aye.
Township Manager Tomcheck,
I'm recused, Trish. 'Cause I present it.
Councilwoman Janjua,
Did you hear her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aye. and Chairwoman Conti.
I so moved. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the resolutions. We have R 2021-16-PBD 1922, the Delco Development, Haddon Point at Route 38 Fostertown, Masonville Road, Block 302.15. This is for the amended preliminary and final subdivision Phase 1, Section 2, and final major subdivision for Phase 2. Any questions or comments from the board on that resolution?
Madam Chair, before the board takes under any questions under consideration, I received an email from the applicant's attorney yesterday proposing revisions to the resolution. The revisions, there are a number of those that are minor in detail as far as the exact acreage of the site, 67.945 acres, the acreage of proposed lot 11, 25.27 acres. The spelling of the applicant's representative's last name, we've corrected that. We also have corrected that some of the townhomes proposed would have decks, so we've made that correction there. The one portion of the resolution in regard to roof drains that was recommended by Bill Long at the meeting, there was a colloquy during the meeting in which it was agreed that the roof drains would not be required, provided that all the swales and the grass areas would be a minimum of 2%. I reviewed that with Bill Long yesterday just to make sure that he, as the board engineer, was comfortable with that, and he was. So we've added a new paragraph 13 to the resolution to state just that's fine. We've also adjusted paragraph 14 to include the roof drain comment. And we were revising condition 11 as far as the landscaping and buffering. We were asking the applicant to provide a plan, but it was agreed that what they submit on their plans as far as the buffering for that and the landscaping, they would work with Jay and the other board professionals for that. And so all of those revisions from a legal standpoint are satisfactory, and I wanted to provide that to the board before the board takes action on the resolution.
And Bill and Jay, you're fine with all those changes?
Yes,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
did discuss the grading issue. They did revise plans. They did achieve the 2% grading. So we're comfortable with the comments regarding the roof drain collection system.
Do the board members have any questions for John, Bill, Jay, any of the professionals on the resolution? Or any questions in general on the resolution?
Madam Chair, was this discussed at the last meeting? I just, when it comes to the resolution, I'm just checking where I'm going to be voting. You know,
Yes,
as far as
so
abstaining or not.
yes, so at the last meeting, we discussed, the decks came up because I brought that to John and Tricia's attention in reviewing the resolution. Bill went into detail about the drainage with the applicant, and Jay and Bill discussed with the applicant coming up with a landscaping buffering plan, because they're, I guess, finding in, with the plantings in these developments, there's becoming some issue with utilities. And so they want to make sure that any landscape that's planted doesn't have an interference with utilities. Did I capture that correctly, Jay and Bill?
Yes.
Perfectly.
So it was addressed at the last meeting. They did agree that they would work with them to address that. And as Bill said, that they've discussed the drainage issue. You know, they were back and forth on how they were going to handle the
Right.
drainage. They've come to agreement on that.
Okay. Well, as far as if it was, I wasn't there for the last meeting, so I'll be putting up an
Abstaining,
abstention.
you'll be
Yeah.
abstaining,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns on the resolution? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, it's Mike Pfeiffer. I make a motion. to
A
accept the
motion to
resolution.
approve the resolution
Yes,
as outlined by John.
as outlined by John with the changes as noted.
I have a motion from Mr. Pfeiffer. Do I have a second?
Second,
I have a second from Township Manager Tomacek. Trish, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Township Manager Tom Check,
aye.
Mr. Bathke,
Aye.
Mr. Nyack,
Aye.
Mr. Pizzo,
Abstain.
Councilwoman Janjua. Mayor Stegler,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cassidy,
Abstain.
Chairwoman Conti.
Aye, so moved. The next item on the agenda is the swearing in of the planning board professionals by the planning board solicitor.
Good evening. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this public hearing?
I do.
I do.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, so now we're going to move into our public hearings. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the procedure of this board that every applicant is limited to 1.5 hours to present their case, and that does include the public portion. If for any reason the applicant exceeds 1.5 hours, it will be continued to the next available meeting unless the board is polled and agrees to continue the public hearing. No application will be initiated after 10 p.m. I also want to let the public know, since we've been doing Zoom meetings, that when I get to the public portion, if you would like to ask questions or make comments, you need to be on camera. We need to be able to see you. So I just want to give the public that heads up when we get to the public portion part of the application. And once we go through the application, I will make the announcement that I'm opening it up to the public portion. Okay, so at this time, we have one public hearing this evening. It's the Union Mill Road LLC. It's PB 2104. It's 541 and 543 Union Mill Road, block 510.02. This is a preliminary and final site plan to construct a 76,000 square foot warehouse. And this application was being continued from the August 12th meeting. The applicant and their representative, I see their attorney is on the call. I see you there. Do you want to have your professionals sworn in? John, we're swearing them in again, correct? Or do you not have to?
If the professionals testified previously, they would not be required to be sworn in again. We will remind them, of course, on the record that they are still under oath. However, if there is a representative of the applicant's team that has not been previously sworn in, I would appreciate it if the applicant's team lets us know, and we'll make sure that we have everyone sworn in accordingly.
So is there anybody new for the applicant to testify this evening that wasn't at the hearing in August?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is Bob Baranowski speaking. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mr. Miller. We had one witness present last time that has not yet testified. That's Kim Dechen, D-E-C-H-E-N, our architect. We did not reach her last time. All of our other witnesses for this evening, Mr. Tapiro is available for any questions. Mr. Cornick is going to give some testimony. Mr. McGinnis will give some testimony. They were all sworn in on August 12th.
Was she sworn in as well, the architect, or no?
I thought everybody was sworn in at the outset, and I thought she was sworn in, but
John,
She's-
do you want to swear her in just to be safe again?
Yeah, Mr. Baranowski and Madam Chair, I don't necessarily call Ms. Decken, so to be on the safe side, we'll swear her in if that's okay with you, Mr. Baranowski.
that makes sense, Mr. Miller. Thank you. I see Ms. Decken on the screen now, too.
All righty. Good evening. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this hearing?
We can't hear her.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Kimberly Decken, Dechen.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Miller. Now,
Welcome.
Kim is going to be batting cleanup tonight after we go through some details of the plan revisions we made. So I'll, if she would like to, she can go back on mute and continue observing until we call her back up to testify. Thank you for coming on board and being sworn in, Kim. So once again, Madam Chairwoman, if I may proceed.
Yes,
Thank you very much. So again, this is Bob Baranowski speaking. I am representing the applicant Union Mill Road LLC. I'd like to just give the board a recap. I mean, we're talking about going back to 2 months. So I want to give the board a brief recap of what we covered at the last meeting and give a brief summary, a quick review of what we'll present tonight. At the previous meeting back on August 12th, we presented testimony from our witnesses as to the proposed warehouse use, which is permitted for this industrial zone property. And we talked about the types of prospective tenants who might be the end users and the mix of traffic that might be expected and the routes that would be utilized to come and go from the proposed new warehouse facility. Specifically first, Rob DePiero of Core One spoke about his company's experience in this type of development. And he talked about their portfolio, which is concentrated along the East Coast and also in Dallas, and their specialty in single to 2 tenant buildings of a similar size to what's proposed here. And he compared what might be expected here to the building the company previously owned at 103 Central, which is in the Eastgate Business Center in Mount Laurel, which you're probably familiar with. Empire Carpet and Richelieu, a cabinet hardware maker, but they both lease space in there. And Mr. DePiero noted those users don't create heavy tractor trailer traffic. Rather, they have a mix of fleet trucks and passenger vehicles and tractor trailers. And then after Rob testified, we had our engineer, Mr. Cornick of K2 Consulting Engineers, walk the board through the site plan and talk about and spoke to your professionals' comments in the review letters and noted that we complied with all the ordinance standards in the site plan without variance relief requested, but for a single existing condition, which is the basin that's currently located 10 feet away from lot 6.02, but far from the Brightview facility on the opposite side of Fernbrook. And we're not moving the basin or making it encroach any further toward lot 6.02. We are expanding it, but we're expanding it further toward our property and our building, not further toward the buffer area, which is a 70-foot buffer. But again, Mr. Cornick can touch on that again briefly to summarize that again when he goes through his testimony. He noted that widening of Walton Road along the frontage and the sidewalk was requested there, but there are wetlands and a floodplain present there, so we're seeking a waiver there. But we are going to be providing and proposing sidewalk along Union Mill. After Mr. Cornick's testimony, we had our traffic engineer, Dan McGinnis from McMahon Associates, who presented his traffic report, gave his professional opinion that the ingress, egress, parking, and site circulation were all designed in accordance with good traffic practice, consistent with ITE and the ordinances and so forth. There was then discussion about truck traffic and the use of Fernbrook for access. And we discussed what would happen if trucks went down Fernbrook, whether trucks would be using Fernbrook for access. Questions were raised about a parking area that had been shown on the plans for trucks on site. And there was discussion of what route the trucks would follow to access the facility. And particularly from the outset, the question was raised by Mr. Angelastro and others that the GPS might route truck traffic to the Fernbrook driveway instead of the Walton driveway where we would want the trucks to go in because the site had an address on Union Mill. So that might be where it sends you. And our site plan is calling for access for trucks to go in through Walton. So we also then had discussion about trucks navigating through the intersections in Bishopsgate Corporate Park from 38 to Bishopsgate to Leadenhall to Walton, and whether the intersections would accommodate, truck turns. And at that time, I believe in the meeting, and again, this is by way of a general summary, we pumped the brakes, we went back to the drawing board, worked on some plan changes, tried to communicate more with your professionals. We attended a staff meeting back on September 21st, and we presented several plan changes. In response to those revised plans, we've received some updated review letters, and it's my understanding we've largely addressed the questions that were raised and hopefully resolved all the issues that were raised at that first hearing in August. And to the extent any, issues might merit further discussion and consideration, we're certainly prepared to address those tonight. And I'd just like to briefly highlight for the board a few key revisions that were made that I think make the most significant impacts here. And we'll talk about updated comments from your professionals, and our witnesses will address them. But first and foremost, we changed the address from Union Mill to a Walton address. It's now known, and that was through Dennis DeClerc, the township assessor. We requested a reassigned street address. So it's now known as 300 to 350 Walton. And I've set this forth in a letter correspondence to counsel for the board, and it's on record with the township. This address change has been effectuated by request. So that the GPS would now direct traffic through Leadenhall. And we have provided some of those exhibits, and Mr. McGinnis will talk about that, to route the trucks where we want them to go through the corporate park, through those intersections, and not through Union Mill to Walton, but rather from Leadenhall to Walton. And we'll talk about that. To further address the comments about that route that the trucks would take through the corporate park, where there is existing truck traffic now, we're proposing road widening at 2 intersections on Leadenhall within available right-of-way to accommodate a wider truck turning radii, and Mr. McGinnis will talk about that. And to the extent necessary, Mr. Cornick can address that also. In the prior meeting, we had talked about putting some signage on Fernbrook to encourage, it was more along the lines of a strong encouragement of trucks to use Walton. And part of the reason is because Brightview has deliveries of, it gets occasional deliveries of tractor trailers on Fernbrook, and we're not looking to discontinue that for Brightview, but we will have a restriction against any truck traffic using Fernbrook for warehouse access. That will be prohibited. We'll put signage, and to the extent any trucks end up on Union Mill, and because they can't go down Walton from that direction, we are going to propose and discuss with your traffic professional, Mr. Angelastro, placing additional truck route signage to further emphasize and enforce the restriction against crossing over that bridge on Walton, provide a truck route either to Mount Laurel Road or to Briggs Road to redirect the trucks to come back in through Bishopsgate. So if any trucks end up on Union Mill, they will be restricted from signage from entering on Fernbrook or entering Walton from Union Mill. They'll have to go around and use a truck route to get in from the proper access way. We further improved the driveway on Walton so trucks can't turn left out toward Union Mill. So we've strengthened that restriction, that restricted movement. And we've eliminated, there was a truck parking area on the site that was previously on the plans. That's been eliminated. We'll provide a ghost parking area to accommodate any future users who may need additional vehicle parking, and we'll design our stormwater accordingly. So in any with regard to any of those changes, to the extent I believe, they were by and large acceptable to the professionals, but to the extent any further refinement or work would be needed, we're certainly committed to working with your professionals to their satisfaction. We've also committed to do a post-development study for traffic, and that will be done as well to determine whether any further, improvements or contributions are needed. And I beat this drum pretty steadily in the last hearing, and you won't be surprised to hear I will, revert to emphasis on this issue again. But really, to bring it full circle, the application is viewed through the lens of a permitted use, and I addressed this at length in a letter to Mr. Miller from October 12th. I just want to have that as part of the record. I'm not going to go through it verbatim. I think it bears emphasis on just some of the key points, because there have been another number of comments raised at the first hearing and some raised at the staff meeting. And I think we're certainly aware these days, we're cognizant of comments that are made in the context in the form of social media. And I think it bears, focusing on the fact that, a warehouse being located on this property is not introducing a foreign concept to the property, and trucks coming to this site is not foreign to this area, and it's not something that's inappropriate or requires many variances. So I would submit the issue of whether a warehouse belongs on the property, that's not an issue here that we're dealing with. That issue's been determined by the governing body. It's in the zoning ordinance, and the warehouse is a permitted use, and that's where we are. We're designing it and dealing with conditions to make sure it functions appropriately. But the warehouse is suited to the size of the property. There's no requested variances for a warehouse that's larger than what's permitted. Traffic doesn't exceed what would be generated by a permitted size of the building. Parking complies, ingress and egress out of the property. It's safe. You can enter and exit the property safely. It's designed in accordance with applicable standards, not backing out onto roadways or putting a driveway in a location where it doesn't belong. And again, there are no dimensional variances other than the one existing non-conforming situation with the basin, which I mentioned, that's already been developed. It's already there. It's in use by Brightview, presumably pursuant to a previously approved development plan. And all other aspects of the application comply with the ordinance requirements. And this board reviews applications for permitted uses, and it doesn't apply generalized considerations. It applies the ordinances, and the board reviews that application in that fashion. That's why the application's here and it's not before the zoning board. And I cited all this in my letter to your board attorney. Basically, in a nutshell, the board's review of a permitted use was generally not intended and shouldn't result in a rejection of a permitted use. We have the Cox Land Use Treatise that we all look to, lawyers, planners, and everybody, your zoning training that you all go through as board members. And that tells us, it's in section 23-10, it's page 491, where a site plan is being considered by a planning board. It's always a permitted use, and in most cases, the board must grant site approval, and where appropriate, waivers or exceptions from ordinance provisions. So we're all going to bear that in mind, and we'll proceed accordingly, and we'll anticipate and expect the board applies that standard of review here. It's basically textbook law. And at the first meeting, again, it involved a number of colloquies and a lot of discussion was had. So what I'd like to do tonight is get our witnesses back in front of the board, let them, present the plan changes that were made. We'll hear from your professionals. I'm sure we'll hear from the public. We'll hear from you as you deliberate, and we'll respond to your questions. And I'd hope we could create a clear record and present the facts and evidence in a clear fashion. And in the event any further review of the board's decision is sought by anybody, we have a clear record to look back on. So I think, I could leave it at that. And when our presentation is done, certainly I'd like to make some closing remarks and address any comments or questions as they come up. But I'd like to get our witnesses moving forward. And I think we've identified them all for Ms. Hochreiter, and hopefully we'll have the screen share capability that will work smoothly and effectively and as wonderfully as Zoom can be when it works correctly. And just as we're getting Mr. Cornick kind of teed up and getting him ready to share his screen, just like to reiterate the current review letters that we have. Want to confirm we now have a letter from Mr. Petrungolo that's dated October 8th, 2021. We have a letter from Mr. Long, your engineer, dated October 6th, 2021. The letter from Mr. Angelastro dated October 13th, 2021. And we have a letter from the fire marshal, Mr. McVeigh, dated October 13th, 2021. Those are all the current review letters that I'm aware of, and we're prepared to address them tonight.
Is that correct? Jay and Bill and Mike and Brian can just address that.
Yes, ma'am. My letter is October 8th.
Mine's October 6th, correct.
My current letter is October 13th.
That is correct. My letter is dated October 13th.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Baranowski, just before we get started, because I know this came up on the last hearing, I just want to remind the public there will be a public portion. So I ask that nobody start sending chat notices or anything of that sort. When we get to the public portion, we will give everybody an opportunity to speak, but we ask that you not send chat notices. You will have an opportunity during the public portion.
That is turned off.
Did you
Lisa.
turn it off? Thank you, Trish. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Baranowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again for your time and for everyone's time and attention in that regard. So if I may at this time, bring forward Mr. Cornick and allow him to share his screen. He can present the board with our revised plan and speak to what changes have been made.
Mr. Cornick, this is John Miller, the board solicitor. Just a reminder that you remain under oath.
Thanks, Mr. Miller. And also,
Thank
I
you.
just want to remind the board, Mr. Cornick is both a professional engineer and a professional planner, that he put his qualifications on the record in August as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
Before I start, I just want to make sure everybody can see my screen and identify
Yes.
that there's a site plan rendering on there.
We can, yes.
Great.
Should
So,
we mark this A1, Mr. Miller? The rendering?
That's fine. This will be A1 and it's actually a color rendering.
Yes.
And just for the record, Mr. Baranowski and or Mr. Cornick, this is a color rendering of what was provided to the board previously.
it is, Mr. Miller. So this is identified as the site rendering plan. It has an original date of January 27th, 2021, with a revision date of October 1st, 2021.
Okay, thank you.
And just to give everybody a brief orientation of the plan, I'm going to utilize the top of the page as being towards the north, to the bottom, which is Union Mill Road, to the south. To the right, you'll see Brightview. There is an existing structure, and that's to the east, and then to the west is Walton Lane. To go over the property briefly and not to kind of carry through what we originally testified for, but this is again block 510.02, lots 6.03 and 6.04. And as Ms. Baranowski indicated, these properties are located in the I Industrial Zoning District. The use of a warehouse is a permitted use. The use of parking lots for vehicles is a permitted use. Access from Walton Lane and from Fernbrook are permitted. And we had revised this plan following a staff meeting, taking the comments by the professionals of the board and staff and applying those comments to this revised plan. So to give you in general what has occurred, there were comments about access of truck traffic on Fernbrook. What we have done is eliminated the potential for truck access. I'm going to zoom in, I hope, quickly into the cul-de-sac so you can see what the changes were. And these were changes, again, as a product of our discussions with your board planner, traffic engineer, and civil engineer for the site. So if you guys, the board recall, we had full truck access off of Fernbrook. We had two access points, the first access point at the terminal end, and that would be removing the existing island to do that. And that was for truck traffic and truck circulation throughout the site. That particular access point, and I can annotate it for you, I hope. This access point here that I'm annotating in red is now a fire access point that is restricted with a breakaway chain. So that does not afford the opportunity for a tractor trailer to enter the site from Fernbrook.
So
What
no vehicle can enter except for a fire vehicle if there's a chain across, correct?
Let me finish the testimony. We do have a second access point for
No,
passenger.
I'm sorry, I just meant at that driveway,
At this driveway, no access is permitted. It is restricted
not even for vehicles.
only for fire vehicles.
Okay.
The second access point is in this location where I'm identifying with a red arrow. And that access point is strictly for passenger vehicles and vans, small vans, that cannot receive a WB67 or a large truck. So therefore, we have restricted any kind of truck traffic from the Fernbrook access point. With that revision, we also identified what we had talked about are the westerly parking lot in this location. If you can follow my cursor, the original layout and design, that was a sea of pavement with striping and gore striped areas. After our discussions again with the board planner and professionals, they had recommended a revision to that parking area to bring it into conformance to the parking lot requirements of the township ordinance, and we had done so. And that was merely taking landscape islands and bringing landscaping features around in accordance with the ordinance. We are proposing this 61 space parking lot to be what we call either ghost or reserved parking. So as indicated in the initial descriptor by Mr. Baranowski, our project meets the intent and the requirements of the parking ordinance for a warehouse use. The size of the building with regards to the warehouse area and the office space requires 272 parking spaces. This plan represents a total of 272 parking spaces. 61 of those spaces will be in the reserved ghost parking scenario. What that means is we have designed the entire site as if the parking would be constructed from day one. That would include stormwater management. And if what the intent is not to construct that area in the initial offering of the building and the parking area. And if the user demands additional parking spaces, then we would certainly entertain and construct those according to the plan if it is so approved. As we talked about as well.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt. Jay Petrangelo here. Just quick question. You're going to phantom those spaces, as you've indicated. Correct me if I'm wrong. Those spaces will be provided if the township deems those are necessary?
Correct.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
And just a real quick
John, while
question
you're on-
while we're on that
I'm sorry.
subject.
Go ahead.
If we approve the ghost parking, they wouldn't have to come back to the board to put that in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That is correct.
If
Okay.
you, I believe the board in the prior application to our hearing last session had something similar.
Yes.
a
I just
similar-
wanted to verify it, and with the public on, I want to clarify things. Thank you.
Sure. So,
John, before you continue, also, I know we've referred to this as a 76,000 square foot warehouse, and we have it on the plans that way. But you did mention there is a component of office space in here, and that's 10,500 square feet of office, right?
that is correct.
And
That
so
was-
it's really 65,500 square feet of warehouse, actual warehouse space, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's how the parking was calculated based on that breakdown, right?
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and continue, please, with
Thank
stormwater.
So,
Hello.
just to give you,
Excuse me, I have a question. I'm actually a resident of Mount Laurel.
You have to wait until, we open public portion. So the public has to be on mute, and when we get done with all the testimony, then I will open the hearing to the public portion, and all public have to wait until that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Cornick, if you could kind of just don't go back too far, but just reset what you were speaking of, so the record's clear what we were testifying about.
Sure. So we kind of stopped at the discussion of the ghost or reserved parking. Again, those are 61 parking spaces that will be placed into the reserved parking situation. And if the township so deems that the parking is required, if there are comments or notice to the township, obviously the developer is obliged to come in and construct those spaces at that notice.
And the stormwater is sized to accommodate build out of that ghost parking area, correct?
So the entire development, as you see on plan and as presented this evening, the 76,000 square foot warehouse, the pavement for all of the truck access points and the bays, as well as the vehicle parking, the stormwater has been designed to handle and manage the entirety of that design. Again, as I navigate through the access to the north side or north elevation of the building, that has not changed. We have two inbound ramps to access the building, traditional to a warehouse. We have a location here. I gotta make sure my annotation's still on. Give me a second. We have a trash compactor that's typical of a warehouse scenario that backs up against one of the bays. And then we have our 21 doors across the north elevation for docking against the warehouse. So the tractor trailers would back into the back or the north elevation of this, unload, and then move on to the next provisioning task. What we do have is a navigation of access from Walton, and this access point has been designed for two or three restrictions. One is to ensure that any navigation or leaving of the site, a WB67 truck can leave, turn onto Walton to the north, and then travel through Mount Laurel back out to the 295 corridor. And Mr. McGinnis will show you that truck turning movement plan and the truck route, which was reviewed at the staff meeting earlier this month. The second point of access into the site from a truck, which would be navigating down Walton from north to south, is that left turning movement into the site. And that, again, we have designed that access point to allow for that truck movement pattern into the site without any conflicts. To go over the overall site design and what was done, we have not changed the mechanics of the stormwater management, the wet pond or expansion of the existing wet pond from the prior testimony. In fact, with this redesign, we have reduced impervious cover, albeit a small amount, but we have reduced it by about 2,000 square feet. And the wet pond design still remains as identified. When we talk about the variance that was discussed in Mr. Baranowski's description, that is the variance between, or the setback between the wet pond in this location and to the property line of the Fernbrook property or the Brightview property. Now, keep in mind, Fernbrook is an access easement. This is not a public right-of-way. So that road that you see, the access point, is privately owned and was part of the master plan subdivision of the Brightview project. So we are asking for variance relief while we find that we don't feel that it's appropriate because it was previously approved as such. We're certainly seeking the C2 variance relief, or what we identify as a flexible C variance for that location. Our proposal is identifying additional landscaping around the wet pond to aid and buffer that deficiency in the buffer zone that your ordinance requires as well.
Right. And John, when you just want to clarify one thing, when you said that you didn't think the variance was appropriate, I take it you're referring to whether or not you call it a variance, since it was already existing, non-conforming, and previously approved, because that's why it's there, correct?
That's correct. You know, traditionally what we find in planning and zoning boards is that when it's an existing non-conforming condition and it was potentially prior approved, that variance is not appropriate, and they remain as an existing non-conforming condition. But we're certainly prepared to go through the C2 criteria with this board, identifying how that this variance relief is appropriate for this potential development.
If I may interrupt again, typically if there's a pre-existing non-conforming condition that is not being impacted by a project, then that pre-existing non-conforming condition may or may not need a new variance if it was something that was previously approved. This basin is there, it is being changed. It is being regraded in that area, and therefore it's my opinion, at least, that a variance is necessary.
And Mr. Petrangelo, I appreciate you pointing that out. We don't, we're not taking issue with presenting the variance proofs for that. I think.
Okay.
Do you want to do that now, Mr. Baranowski?
Yes,
Since
thank
we're
you, Madam
talking
Chair.
about it?
Yeah,
so
John,
it
why don't you?
keeps with the flow?
Sure, absolutely. So again, what we are discussing is variance relief from your ordinance where there's a buffering requirement between a residential use, which we're identifying Brightview as being such, and an adjacent use that's not commensurate to the residential use. Just to give you a way of direction, again, we have roughly a 10-foot setback to the Brightview property line. We are then, we have
Just to clarify, Mr. Cornick, because we have public on the call, so I want to make sure they understand this. So the red line that you've drawn to the right next to Fernbrook Lane is the property line for Brightview.
that is correct.
Just want to clarify that for them as we move through this so they understand what you're referring to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is helpful.
Challenges of Zoom. So again, what Chairwoman was identifying is my first line in red. That is the property line that we're identifying as the controlling buffer setback line to what we're asking variance relief for. The secondary line to the left of the page or to the west is the top of bank of the existing wet pond where Mr. Petrangelo identified we're regrading. We're not regrading this area of the basin, but we certainly are expanding and regrading the basin to the west away from that area violation of the ordinance.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just again, clarification. Your grading plan is showing proposed grades and proposed grading in that area. So
we're cleaning that up. We're not changing anything, but
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that I don't want somebody to come out there in the future and say, hold it, they said they weren't going to change this and there's graders out there. So,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Hasn't been maintained, so we're cleaning this thing up. So
we're
to give you the dimension from the top of bank to Brightview, just so everybody can see from the public, that dimension is roughly 220 feet from top of bank to the closest point of the Brightview use. So again, we're identifying this as a C2 variance relief, what is commonly known as flexible C variance. And when you get into this condition, you have to provide certain criteria and a discussion of the positive and negative impacts requesting of this variance. So number one, we have to prove that the purpose of the municipal land use law would be advanced by a deviation from the zoning ordinance requirement. The variance can be granted without substantial detriment to public good. Variance benefits would substantially impair or would not substantially impair or outweigh any detriment, and that the variance will not substantially impair the intent and the purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. All key components of the discussion as it relates to this particular variance relief. So again, the C2, it's where an application or appeal relating to a specific piece of property, the purpose of the act would be advanced by a deviation for the zoning ordinance requirements, and that the benefits of the deviation would outweigh any detriment. This site is particularly suited for the use. Again, we've identified that it is in the industrial zone. The warehouse use is a permitted use within the industrial zone. And your municipal, your master plan and reexamination reports continue to identify the I zone in this area to be maintained as such. Again, identified that the existing basin and the overall development was historically constructed in this manner. The Brightview use, again, is 220 feet away from the top of bank. And we are providing additional landscaping to provide additional buffering from that wet pond. If you can look to the south of this rendering, you can also see a similar wet pond that is much closer to the Brightview property or Brightview building. And again, it's a commensurate use. These ponds were part of the overall subdivision that occurred in the 1990 era. So it's a similar site feature that we feel is commensurate to everything that's going on out here. So as we identify and evaluate the C2 variance, we're also looking at purposes of the municipal land use law or purpose of the act that are appropriate and can be identified for this potential variance relief sought. I find that there are two. One is C, provide adequate air, light, and open space. Again, it's an existing condition. It's not only a stormwater management measure, but it's also a physical feature, a visual feature. It's a wet pond. And we are going to provide additional landscaping around that existing wet pond, not only the existing banks, but the expanded banks as a result of our proposal. I also identify I, and that's to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. Again, we're taking an existing wet pond that has not been maintained. And if you have been to the site as board members, as you should, you'll see that there's not a lot of vegetation around it, some overgrowth. It hasn't been maintained over the life since it was constructed. So we're going to come in, clean up this wet pond and provide the additional plantings that are necessary to do so. So we feel that the expansion in what we're proposing is consistent with the purpose of Act I.
Right. So John, in summary, like, would you say that just in general, in more plain terms, leaving it where it is in its existing location and regrading it and using it in the existing location is a better zoning alternative than trying to move it 70 feet away from that line and disturbing other areas of the property?
It is, and if you start to discuss that kind of movement, then you'd have your challenges with your environmental constraints. We have a uniquely shaped lot. We have environmental constraints with freshwater wetlands, flood hazard area. So we would be challenged to displace that existing wet pond on site to achieve the 70-foot setback, albeit it was already approved as such, and you have a similar wet pond closer to the Brightview structure than ours on the site itself. So
again, in terms of negative criteria, again, in more kind of plain and simple terms, this isn't hurting Brightview at all to leave it where it is and to further expand it for use, but not expand it further toward Brightview.
Bob, I would agree as a professional engineer and planner that, the pond as it sits today and what we're going to do to it, which is predominantly away from Brightview, will have no negative impact to the Brightview use or user.
So no negative impacts to them and no negative impact to the zoning or zone plan by leaving it here?
No, I have done our analysis and find that the variance can be granted without a substantial detriment to the public good, and that it's an existing nonconformity. No impacts with regards to a vertical structure that's being constructed, near that property line. We have an existing wet pond that is basically below grade. So all you do see is water, and we're providing vegetation around that to bolster that buffer that's not there.
Mr. Cornick and Jay, you can chime in on this. Just to clarify for the public so that people understand, the reason you're requesting a variance, so it's an existing pond, and the township ordinance requires that there has to be a setback based on the property line, not where the structure is on the building. So even though Brightview is, I think you said 240 feet away from where this pond currently exists, because their property line is closer to the pond, that's why you're requesting the variance from the board, is because it's based on the property line. The setback is based on the property line, not the structure.
That is correct.
Right. I just want to clarify things with the number of public on the call so that they understand as we move along.
And Madam Chair, the ordinance basically says that you have to buffer non-residential to residential.
Correct.
So being that the warehouse is non-residential and the residential portion becomes the entire property of the Brightview, it's not just the building itself, it's the entire property. Because obviously it's a residential use and a residential activity, the open space, the grass area, the area for residents to walk is part of the residential use. And therefore, reducing that buffer is impacting the enjoyment of their property as well.
But because it's an existing use, but just because of where the lines are and the way our ordinance is, they're not changing that usage of that pond, but they need the variance because of the property line versus the setback, not the building.
They are regrading the pond. They're doing grading activities, at least that's what the grading plan shows. There are changing slopes or amending the grading in the area, which that is kicking the need for the variance. The fact that they are making changes. What we're looking at is not necessarily the fact that the use is or isn't existing permitted, the industrial use isn't permitted. It's a question of, is the use permitted in that proximity to the residential? The testimony provided, at least so far, has been that, one, the use is in the I zone and therefore the use should be okay. But that's not the question. The question is it appropriate within 10 feet of a residential use? I'm not sure how Purpose C is advanced in that, any project has to have a basin. So how is, having a basin adding or increasing or improving light, air, and open space? I don't know how that's being advanced.
Jay, before you go further, I guess we're going to get
Okay.
into that, I guess, more in when you do your review, whether the criteria has been met. And I think to Mr. Cornick's point, he could testify further to it, but, there's a basin there instead of a building or instead of parking, right? So that's air, light, and open space. And Brightview, the stormwater overall around the property is graded to, for this basin also to take runoff from their property as well. And the road is located on lot 6.02, and the basin was put there when their site was developed. And it's an assisted living facility. It's not someone's house. So, I mean, there's a commercial element, I know it's deemed a residential use in
We have
nature.
to go based on what, we have to go based on what
Sure.
zoned. So that's
Sure.
what Jay's referring to.
And understood. And the upshot is that we're not putting the basin there. We're grading in the area. We're using what's there, part of which was put there for use also by Brightview. And it's close to a road. It's not 10 feet away from Brightview's building or 10 feet away from their lawn. It's between, it's 10 feet away from the edge of a property line because Fernbrook is located entirely within lot 6.02. It's part of what, required us to get that into the application as well, which it is. So, I think from a C2 variance perspective, the benefits outweighing the burdens is where, the analysis lies. And, I think as Mr. Cornick testified, the accessory use of the basin being associated with a permitted use, it's not something being, a use being introduced that is incongruous with the prior use of the property by Brightview. It's been there all along before the basin's been there before the warehouse was there, and it's part of the overall developed part of the site. So, I think the C2 variance, testimony Mr. Cornick gave, the shoe fits, and, happy to hear what you think further of that as we go through, your review letter. But if we could, I think it would be good to have John continue with, conclude the stormwater discussion and move that along, and then get to Dan.
And I think that I get what you're saying. I believe, and I could be wrong, and Madam Chair, I'm leaving this to you, is that I thought you had asked for my comments
did.
at this time.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I just as we were going through the variance, since he was
Okay.
talking about it. And then this way too, once Jay can put his comments out there, and then when Jay gets to his report, your professionals will know what he's referencing or what his concerns are so that they're prepared to address it when he gets back to his report.
Yeah, we could, Madam
Understood.
Chair, we could proceed and, handle it the way we do typically is go through the letters at the prior meeting, we went through a lot of the comments in our letter. I think the only thing we have tonight is to go through what may or may not have changed in the letter.
Correct.
But that's fine. We can wait until I go through my letter and we'll address it then.
Well, Bob, if I'd like to hear what he's got to say about the variance testimony. That way, when we get to the letter, I'm certainly prepared to provide support on it. Go ahead, Jeff. I'd like to hear what you're not agreeing on. I'd like to hear what he's not agreeing on with regards to the purposes of the act discussion, and then that way we can obviously address that. Go
That's
ahead.
what I figured. If Jay gave you his comments, then when he gets to his letter, you're prepared to respond.
Yeah, give John a little time so he can prep. Again, basin is a typical part of a project. All projects have them. So I don't know how this is advancing open space and adequate light and air. It's something that's necessary for the project. Frankly, if we had a smaller building, for example, a smaller pond would be necessary. And I think that's something that's appropriate to discuss and address. I don't know how a basin is advancing purpose I, which is referring to promoting a desirable visual environment. Guess it's a matter of opinion as to whether a basin is a desirable visual environment or not. But again, how does a basin necessary for a commercial project advance that purpose? In regard to the impact on our zone plan and our zoning ordinance, I think there is an impact. The fact that the ordinance requires the 70-foot buffer and the buffer is not being met, I think impacts our zone plan and our zoning ordinance. And again, the standard isn't to, per se, the building. It's to the entirety of the use, which is the basin's part of it. The basin needs to be out of the buffer. Our ordinance is very specific about that. We've updated our master plan a few years ago. It didn't change. I think there is an impact to our ordinance. To be fair, it is a pond that exists, but it is being changed. It's being expanded. It's being regraded. There's improvements made. The standard question that always comes up with a variance like this is, what are the alternatives? Is there another way to provide this basin and the necessary requirements of this and meet the ordinance? The applicants raised the legitimate point that they do have wetlands on site. That does make it difficult. But the alternate question to that is, if it's a smaller building with less parking and less traffic, that would reduce the size of the basin. Could they then comply to the ordinance requirements? And I think that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and thanks, Mr. Petrangelo. I can have Mr. Cornick, address that further, and what I believe he may say would pertain to, the detriments of moving this basin, putting it into the woods. The fact that the building coverage itself is 7.11%, where 50% is permitted. So this building could be bigger and be consistent and compliant with the ordinance. So I'm kind of surprised you're not more supportive of leaving the basin where it is and regrading it and making it work better, because it's a condition that has been there for umpteen years that Brightview has dealt with. If we could put a fountain in there, people can come over and feed the ducks. I mean, whatever you think enhances the joy of the life.
I think Mr. Baranowski, Jay just wants the argument to be firm enough to justify the board giving the variance.
Sure.
I think it needs to be explained.
That's what we need to have. And so he just wants to provide Mr. Cornick with his concerns so that he can prepare that argument for when Jay gets to his report.
Sure. And I would think also Mr. Cornick would look at, the functionality of leaving the basin where it is and how it would function in accordance with the existing drainage patterns and not require more disturbance and disruption of the whole site. And again, the buffering that's provided around it, we're looking, it looks to me from this plan, and John could pick up from here really, but it looks like we're enhancing the buffering with some plantings and making this basin more functional and actually more aesthetically pleasing. So
one of the key questions that comes to play is, do the benefits outweigh the detriments?
Right.
So I
Well,
think
John, why
one of
don't
the
you
things
pick up
that
with
has
that?
to be discussed
I
is
can-
what would be
listen,
the
I can
impact
certainly-
of, well, hold
at
on,
this-
John, I'm sorry. Hold on, John. One of the things that has to be addressed is what would be the impacts of, complying to the ordinance. And, I think that's something that does need to be talked about.
John,
John, can you speak
Mr.
to that?
Cornick, do you want to do that now, or do you want to do it when Jay gets to his report?
Why don't we do it when he gets to report? That way I can hear everything else that he has to say, and then we can obviously discuss that, post his comments.
Okay.
Yep, and that
Do you have
sounds
any
good.
more you want to present, Mr. Cornick?
No, I mean, at this point, Chairwoman, what we looked at is the changes to the plan based upon the discussions with staff during the staff meeting. Unfortunately, the buffering discussion or that setback of the 70 feet was never even mentioned during that meeting. But, at this point, we'll be more than happy to provide additional testimony after we hear Mr. Petrangolo's review.
Okay, so two questions real quick, Mr. Cornick, before we move on to the next witness. Just to clarify for the public, when we're looking at this rendering, below the retention pond, all of those trees that are showing now would stay in place. There's no, if this current plan were to be approved, all of those trees buffering this facility from Union Mill and up along Walton would stay in place, correct?
So as testified in the prior meeting, those vegetated areas that I'm going to highlight right now in this rendering, those are all part of the freshwater wetlands complex and flood hazard area that runs through our property and through the Brightview property. In addition, part of our design and discussion with the design team and ownership was to maintain as much of the tree line along Walton so as to continue a natural buffer, as you can see, between the existing residential homes on Walton Lane and our proposed use. So that was the purpose of the design, so that we would have less of an impact to the overall community.
Okay.
Within the industrial zone, mind you, the use, again, being an approved use.
And
And
if
then
I
the second, just real quick, the second question, just so, again, the public who's looking at this understands. So off of Walton, you have this, on the southwest corner of the building, you have the drainage right there. That's not a road, that's the drainage. If you can explain that so people understand, it looks like a road on the plan, so that they understand that that's for drainage.
That's for drainage, that is
So
correct.
it's not a road, it's not an entrance, it's not a vehicle usage, it's
No.
for drainage purposes to drain into that retention pond.
That's correct.
Just want to clarify that for the public. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Baranowski, your next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, before we move further, I just want to make a quick point while we're not too distant from the topic of the basin and impacts on Brightview. Brightview consented to the application. They consented and we agreed on a landscape plan. They literally signed off on this application and presenting it to the board. So, they are literally on board with the plan that as it's been presented. So we'll take that into consideration moving forward. So thanks for the opportunity to make that comment. So moving on to further testimony, I'd like to have Mr. McGinnis, if he can come on camera and if we can get him off mute. And I think Mr. Cornick may be the one who continues sharing his screen to present the plans that Mr. McGinnis will discuss with the board to talk about our changes to the traffic, to the road, the widening of the different various intersections that I mentioned previously and so forth. So I don't see Mr. McGinnis up on here because
There's a lot of people. Let's see.
There's a
Mr.
lot of
McGinnis, are
people.
you?
I'm here.
Are you on
there
camera?
you go.
Bob and Mr. Miller, this is the same rendering, but a much larger scale. So we should probably give it some qualification and identify it as a exhibit A2.
Yeah, Dan's going to testify on this one. Yeah, can you talk about the plan date and the revised date, please, also?
Sure. So again, this is a site rendering plan as prepared by our office. It's dated the same dates as the prior plan, but it's just a much larger scale with a larger picture. It's dated January 27, 2021, with a revision date of October 1st, 2021. Same orientation, north to the top is to the top of the page. To the south, the bottom is Union Mill Road. To the right is Brightview. You can see NFL Films, and to the left or to the west is Walton. So,
Mr. McGinnis, same question that I had for Mr. Cornick. Is this a plan that was provided previously to the board? Say they may not be colorized or?
it is.
Okay,
And that's John Cornick saying that, Mr. Miller.
all righty, thank you.
All right.
And that'll
so-
Thank you very much.
That'll be A2 as we discussed.
Thanks, Mr. Miller. Now, Mr. McInnes, just if you could please just, remind the board of your, quickly of your qualifications, and you're reminded that you were placed under oath previously, so you're still under oath.
Certainly. My name is Daniel McGinnis. I'm with McManus Associates. I've been a traffic engineer with a licensed, with my professional engineer's license, practicing traffic engineering since 2008. I've testified before various planning boards throughout the state of New Jersey.
Thank you. All right, you could proceed to tell the board what changes we made to address the issues raised at the last meeting.
Certainly. So we updated our traffic analysis to reflect the restriction of trucks from the Fernbrook access. It wasn't a great deal of trucks that we shifted over to Walton Avenue in our analysis, but we wanted to make it consistent with our current proposal. But the overall conclusions of the analysis didn't change. That we're providing safe and efficient and functional access with both accesses for passenger vehicles and trucks alike. Also in that letter, this is our October 1st letter, we provided some output from various truck navigation software platforms, showing that from the from the roads that we expect most of the truck traffic to arrive to the site from, that's Interstate 295 and the New Jersey Turnpike, that with those various platforms, the drivers would be directed to the site via Route 38, Leadenhall, rather Bishopsgate, Leadenhall, and Walton Avenue. So that would comprise the majority of the origins of the truck traffic to the site. But as Mr. Angelastro pointed out in his most recent letter, to be sure, there may be some truck traffic arriving to the site from the south and southeast, and that's why, as Mr. Baranowski stated, we're proposing to improve the signage along Walton Avenue to better emphasize the weight restriction for trucks across the bridge, to provide supplemental signage directing trucks that are destined to the site to use the alternate route, and to provide signage along that route, guiding them to that route. And that could be along Union Mill Road to Briggs Road to Leadenhall Road to Walton Avenue, or the other way along Union Mill Road to Mount Laurel Road to Route 38, or both, just to make sure that you pick them up no matter which direction they approach from. That would be, in accordance with the manual on uniform traffic control devices, and even exceeding those minimum requirements to provide, additional emphasis and ensure that those truck drivers get to the preferred route. So we would work with the board professionals on the details of the signage, and the applicant would commit to install those.
And Dan, is there similar signage currently installed down by the Comcast Distribution Center at the corner of Martyr and Walton? Directing trucks to use a specific entrance of the facility.
There is some truck route signage along Bishopsgate directing truck traffic to the preferred routes to access the Comcast Center. So it would be consistent with that signage. But
is that a consistent approach as you've used in similar applications in other localities?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the bottom line, I think, is if there's a weight restriction on a bridge, this is the remedy. You post the weight restriction, and then you post the routes that you want the trucks to take. And I know there's been some skepticism about whether truck drivers, would actually follow those signs, but it's my opinion that truck drivers don't want to damage a bridge, their truck, or their cargo, and they'll follow these signs, particularly with the additional emphasis and signage we're proposing.
Right, that no trucker wants to end up in a tree, in a creek, or get a ticket for violating the traffic restrictions, right?
That's my opinion.
All right, so what else you got?
So in addition, we submitted a concept plan for improvements along Leadenhall Road. Mr. Cornick, if you wouldn't mind putting that up, or I can share my screen. Thank you. This is a plan dated September 28th, 2021, a concept plan indicating improvements along Leadenhall Road and truck movements for, a WB 67 full-size tractor trailer vehicle. So,
and Dan, before you get into it further, let's just have, if I can agree with Mr. Miller, we'll mark this A3. And I think you've identified it. John, you're on mute.
That's correct.
Sorry about that. That's yes, it'll be A3. That's fine. I know that was submitted with the application package, and we'll just make a note that it is colorized for the record.
Thank you. All right, Dan, I'm sorry. Thanks. Go ahead and please talk about that exhibit.
thank you. Yeah, so this exhibit, again, provided in response to concerns raised at the previous hearing about whether Leadenhall Road and the intersections along it at Walton Avenue and Bishopsgate Boulevard can accommodate trucks. We've prepared this concept plan showing, a truck turning analysis and showing improvements proposed by the applicant to better accommodate trucks to and from the site. So starting on the left, this is the intersection of Leadenhall Road and Bishopsgate Boulevard. You can see truck traffic arriving along Bishopsgate Boulevard, turning right onto Leadenhall Road with a modest amount of widening shown in yellow there. That movement can be accommodated. Similarly, the truck movement is shown from Leadenhall Road turning left onto Bishopsgate Boulevard with a minor amount of median removal and pavement restoration that can be accommodated. And then similarly on the right, you see the intersection of Leadenhall Road and Walton Avenue. Again, trucks coming from the site along Walton Avenue, turning right onto Leadenhall Road can be accommodated with some modest widening. And then similarly, arriving to the site from Leadenhall Road, turning left onto Walton Avenue with some median removal and pavement restoration. Those movements can also be accommodated. So this is a concept plan, but it shows that the concept works, and the applicant would commit to survey and design and construct these improvements to better provide truck access to and from the site. I know there's some concern expressed in Mr. Angelastro's most recent letter about some of these truck turning envelopes appearing to run too close to the curb lines. We would just like to assure that we would continue to work with the board's professionals. Once this thing is surveyed and during final design, we can provide a little more breathing room. But again, this is a concept plan, and it shows that the concept works, and that truck access to and from the site can be provided safely and efficiently.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And Dan, you've been out in this area. You've made observations of these intersections, correct?
Yes, indeed.
And you've seen the Bishopsgate approved plans, and our concept plans generally show the widening to be done in existing right of way, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it sounds like your opinion is you feel that although this is a conceptual plan, we can make it work once it's fully surveyed and engineered to make it workable, and work with Mr. Angelastro to make sure he's satisfied with the final plan, correct?
Yes, absolutely can. And just to just sort of summarize, I mean, this is an industrial use in an industrial zone where trucks are to be anticipated, and just with some minor additional modifications, these routes will accommodate trucks to and from the site.
Okay, thank you. And do you have anything else, Dan?
No, that's it, unless there are questions.
Thank you. I think that covers the testimony from Mr. McInnes, Madam Chair, and if we could proceed and I could introduce Ms. Decken and we could get
Yep.
the architectural rendering.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Kim, if I can get you back with,
Back. Okay, do I have share screen?
you should be able to if we ask Ms. Hochreiter if that's okay. If we can give Ms. Decken shared screen capabilities.
Good to
Promote you
go.
to presenter or whatever we call it on this platform.
She's good. Trish said she's good.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're good.
Thank you. Okay, Kim, you should be able to take control of the screen and put up your exhibit.
All right, there we go.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim, can you just, before you start speaking, confirm again, who you are, your qualifications? We didn't go through that previously.
Yeah, no problem. My name is Kim Decken, TK Studio. I am a registered architect and have been practicing for over 15 years and have appeared in multiple boards throughout the state of New Jersey.
Thank you. We'll recognize your credentials.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Kim, before you start also, please, can we have the exhibit will reference as your rendering here as A4?
John, is that good?
That's fine. Is there a date on that? It's cut off from my screen.
Oh, yeah, May
Just May
12th.
12th.
Get that, John?
And this is a color architectural rendering. Is that how you would describe it?
Correct.
Okay, dated May 12, 2021. Thank you. Got it.
So this is a rendering that's a representation of what the building will look like. You can, most of the building will be the horizontal ribbed standard metal panel. And then at each of the corners of the building where we'll have, presumable office space, it's going to be dressed up with a nicer, more decorative panel and storefront and awnings. And that is the basic summary of the building. I do have an architectural floor plan and elevations not colored that I can pull up. This gives the most accurate representation of what the building will look like.
It'll be a conforming height, right, Ms. Decken?
That is correct.
Would the board like to, why don't we pull up the floor plans and renderings, the floor plans, if you would, please, and we could just run through those. And we'll mark them as A5. If you could just identify them and give it a date.
Okay, so this is the floor plan. It is April 8th.
We'll call this A5, and it's April 8th, 2021. That was prepared by your office.
That is correct. And this is the elevations, also April 8th.
Mr. Miller, we want to mark those A5 and A6, floor plan
Yes.
A5, elevation A6.
Elevation will be A6. The date again for the elevation?
April 8th.
April 8, and then jumping back to A5, architectural floor plans dated April 8, 2021.
Correct.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Decken. Just can you walk us through first A5 and then A6, please?
Absolutely. This is the overall architectural floor plan of the building. This corner here and this corner here are the two corners I was referring to in the rendering. That will have the storefront and be sort of the main points of entry for each side. Then this is the rear loading area that is depicted on the site plan as well. These are the dock height doors, and these are the two drive-in doors.
Now, real quick, you say storefront, but it's actually office space, not retail space, correct?
Storefront is the term, the architectural term to use that type. That's the system of window.
With the windows. So I just want to clarify for the record. So when we say office space, it's office space, not retail space.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then if we flip to the elevations, you can see this here, the glazing system and the door system is referred to as storefront. And so this is the front of the building. The max height of the building you can see is 40 feet at the top of the parapet at the front, and the remainder is 36 feet at the front.
Okay, does that about cover it, Ms. Decken?
That covers it.
Okay. All right, that
Pardon.
would be the remainder of the testimony we have to offer in our direct case tonight. And hopefully we can move forward to hear from your professionals and the public and continue on with the evening.
Okay,
Ma-
so we're gonna
Madam
move,
Chair,
I'm gonna
if I-
move Jay. I was gonna say, Jay, can we move to your testimony?
okay,
I wanted
Yeah,
to
go-
start to go into our reports. Because I don't know if we can stop the screen sharing.
We
the
can.
only thing I was going to ask for the architecturals is if there was a rendering from Walton Avenue as well. If we had a rendering that would show what it's looked like from Walton Avenue. That was the only thing I was asking about the architecturals.
Oh, no, we do not have a rendering from that view.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Jay, we're gonna go into your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Our letter is dated August 8th, 2021, as we stated earlier. This is, as the board's aware, we've prepared multiple letters on this project, and the applicant has revised the plans multiple times and have addressed many of the comments in our letter. We've already gone through and discussed, I think, the buffer variance is presented by the applicant. The ordinance requires a 70-foot buffer between commercial or non-residential and residential. The plans have been revised so that the parking area that was formerly known as the truck parking area, it's now proposed as the phantom area, will comply to the buffer. Previously, that did not. The revised plans show it complying. So the variance that's necessary, as we've discussed tonight, is for the basin. I will note that additional landscaping has been provided in that area between the basin and the Fernbrook, as we've requested. Going through the parking, the applicant is proposing, as they've stated, they're going to meet the ordinance requirements for the number of parking spaces. However, they are proposing to, I refer to them as phantom, they refer to them as ghost, 61 of the spaces. Provided that there's a condition that those spaces will be provided if and when the township directs those parking stalls to be installed, I'd have no objection to ghosting the spaces. There's definitely a benefit of not putting them in if they're not going to be used. But again, I just think we want to make sure that they will go in if the township is asking for them, which the applicant has said they would do. I would just want that noted in the resolution. There is a waiver necessary of section 138.17 for the sidewalks. Our ordinance requires sidewalks to be provided along all street frontages. The applicant is providing the sidewalk along Union Mill. However, they're asking for a waiver of providing the sidewalk along Walton Avenue. Their argument along Walton is due to the environmental conditions in the field, and therefore they cannot provide the sidewalks. Typically, if the board considers a waiver, which is a rarity, but if they have, it's been with the caveat that a contribution be provided for the sidewalks into the township fund, so that sidewalks can be provided if and where necessary at a later date or in an alternate location. If the board feels it's appropriate to grant that waiver, I would recommend that it be with the condition that a contribution be provided in lieu of the sidewalks installed. In regard,
Jay, I'm sorry, do you mind if I just make a quick comment at this point with regard to the sidewalk and that ordinance?
I've interrupted you enough, Bob. You could do it to me.
I think that's fair, Jay. Thank you. Appreciate that. I realize section 138-17 does say sidewalks are required along all streets, but the next sentence in that ordinance says that the township requires them in areas where the probable volume of pedestrian traffic, the development's location in relation to other populated areas, and high vehicular traffic, pedestrian access to bus stops, schools, parks, and other public places, and the general type of improvement intended indicate the advisability of providing a pedestrian way. So I think those are all considerations for the board to look at in connection with the waiver request. So thanks for the opportunity to state that, Jay.
In regard to the planting design, we have discussed the plantings along the buffer area. I am recommending that additional buffer plantings be provided along between, basically, when you look at their site, they have provided additional plantings between the basin and Fernbrook, and I had no objection to what's provided there. But I believe that there should be additional plantings provided between the property line of Brightview and the parking areas and the drive aisles entrance to the industrial site, basically along that northern property line leading down to Fernbrook. I think, and I could be wrong, the applicant had agreed to work with our office on that planting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Section 138.21 requires compensatory plantings to be provided. This site is currently wooded. Appears like all the trees out of the wetlands are going to be removed. A partial compensatory or tree removal plan has been provided. However, there's been no compensatory planting provided. And there's been no indication as to the number of trees greater than 5-inch caliper that would be removed. That again is an ordinance requirement, and compensatory planting should be provided, and we would recommend that those plantings be installed.
Mr. Baranowski, do you agree with that? Comply. Okay, thank you.
Will comply. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So let me note that if you don't mind. We've asked that the lighting be reduced to 0.2 foot candles at the property line. The idea is to obviously reduce the potential impact on the adjacent residential properties. The plans have been revised to drop the lighting down to 0.6. Will the applicant, are you agreeing to revise that further or no? I wasn't sure, to be honest.
Yes.
Will do. Okay, great. Thank you. The color architectural rendering has been provided tonight as required by our ordinance. They have addressed that comment.
Jay, real quick, if I could just have the applicant's professional on camera, so when you respond to questions from our professionals, you're on video, because that is a requirement. So you can be muted. I just need you on video, so when you respond. Thank you. Sorry, Jay.
Welcome. I would typically like to see a rendering that would show how this site would look from Walton. Again, that's where some of the residential units are located. That's where they will be seeing the site. The applicant has satisfied the requirement by providing basically the view from Fernbrook. But the loading area in the rear of the site will be visible from Walton, and that's obviously what we're looking to screen. Correct me if I am wrong, Mr. Baranowski, but you have indicated you will provide additional buffering along that area if necessary?
It will work with your office. If it's deemed necessary, we'll do so. And the view from that area, I believe, was not presented because it's just a wall of trees, but we'll work with you on that.
I agree that there is definitely vegetation along Walton that's going to be remaining. Again, you have the wetlands in that area and you're retaining some of the plant material. But, you know, the view obviously from the driveway is going to have a clear shot directly into your loading area. And that's, you know, our ordinance requires that those loading areas be screened from the street. But again, you've agreed to work with us to address that issue.
We will.
The signage does comply with ordinance standards. There's no variances necessary for the signage. The applicants indicated that there will be a trash compactor on site. Again, the ordinance requires that compactor be screened from off-site views. So that will be additional screening that will be necessary. The applicant previously acknowledged their affordable housing obligation and that they would satisfy that obligation. And they have indicated a construction trailer will be utilized on site. They've shown that on the plans, and that will be part of the site plan approval. They are the remaining comments from my letter. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I think we
Jay, do you
discussed.
want Mr. Cornick to address your variance issues at this time?
I've offered my response to those. Ma'am, if he wants to disagree with me, he's more than welcome to respond, and I'll respond back.
Understood. I think if I might, Madam Chair, I would like to have Mr. Cornick just give some additional testimony
Certainly.
on whether the benefits outweigh the detriments. And as Mr. Petrangelo mentioned, talk about, you know, leaving it where it is compared to moving it. And if I could have Mr. Cornick just briefly do that, I'd like to do
That
so.
would be great.
Thank you.
Certainly, and Mr. Petrangelo, I like to argue a lot, so the unfortunate is that he moved his office too far away from mine, so I can't walk down to his office anymore.
Yeah, John, Jay wants to go home and see the Eagles play sometime tonight.
I didn't know
Don't belabor the
the Eagles were playing. So with regards to the purposes of the act, and obviously Mr. Petrangelo doesn't agree with what we stated with regards to C, which is that provide adequate air, light, and open space. And traditionally as a planner, you're always arguing whether or not a proposed building or the density of a structure is not providing that. And we're kind of doing the inverse of that, arguing an open water basin isn't meeting the intent of the purposes of the act. I can certainly argue that it does. And good civic engineering, design, and planning, you look at an overall tract of what you can do, not only with parking and transportation and site circulation and landscaping and buffers, but you also look at existing features. And we try to design within those features. And if you look at the aerial, if you want me to share my screen, you can see that where we are expanding the basin is essentially in an area that is not currently vegetated. It's open area. So we've certainly picked an area that does that, which is continue to provide adequate air, light, and open space. We can certainly find other areas on the site outside of wetlands, wetland buffers, up in the northeast corridor, and clear all those trees and put a basin in and achieve the same standard. But I find that in our design, we are so doing the purpose of the act, C, in providing that. That mirrors the discussion in when you get into the purpose I, which is that good civic design discussion. As I stated, if you look at the Brightview property, just about 30 feet away from the actual building, there's a similar wet pond that is looking similar in landscape, similar in design. So I opine that there certainly isn't a detriment to the zone plan, nor the use that is not a permitted use in the industrial zone. Mind you that a residential use is not a permitted use in the residential zone, but that basin was part of the overall master plan of the area. So I can argue that the benefit certainly outweighs the detriment. It's consistent with what this township had previously approved from a stormwater management perspective. And I think it has no detriment to the zone plan or the adjacent property.
And John, do we agree to enhance landscaping planting around the basin as well? So does that mitigate? Does the board look at mitigating factors like the increased landscaping around the basin? Is that appropriate here?
That does. I mean, that carries into purpose I, and that's, providing good civic design. We're taking basically a wet pond that doesn't have any vegetation. It's got very little visual, good visual environment, and coming in and putting a nice landscaping design around it. So again, I certainly can say with confidence as a professional planner that what we are proposing, which is an expansion of an existing wet pond, not within that buffer to the west, certainly is a benefit not only to the zone and the zone plan, but the area. Again, we can certainly find other areas, clear trees, and denude the land of additional vegetation to get the stormwater management to function. But we found and designed that this is the appropriate location for that expansion and has no detriment to the zone or zone plan.
Thank you. I think that's all we have on that variance testimony, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Jay, anything else on the variance testimony?
No, no. The applicants indicated that, if they were going to change that basin, that would require clearing of additional trees. Certainly, that would be a reason to offset changing the basin. Preservation of existing vegetation is important and a benefit. I haven't seen any analysis to that effect to fully evaluate it, but that's their testimony. So be it. Again, I still question the impact to our zone plan and our zoning ordinance, because the ordinance does specifically state that the buffer is required. The ordinance does not differentiate between a pre-existing non-conforming use in a zone. It specifically says residential use or zone. So the ordinance takes that into consideration. Brightview exists, it's been approved, it was approved, and it's there, and the buffer and the variance is definitely required. So I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Does the board members have any questions for Jay or for the applicant based on Jay's report or their testimony?
Jay, do we need to address the sidewalk discussion? I think there were two discussions there. One was sidewalk, and then you had one prior to that. I should have made a note of what it was that you asked for.
Well, my recommendation for the sidewalk is that the ordinance requires the sidewalk to be installed.
Yep.
The applicant is asking to not install it due to environmental constraints. He certainly has that right to ask for the waiver. If the board deems it appropriate to grant the waiver, I would recommend that it be with the caveat that a cash contribution be provided for those sidewalk improvements.
Would you like to weigh in?
It's very rare when the board just frankly grants a complete waiver without at least requiring the contribution. Obviously, sidewalks are very, very important. They have to do with site safety. They have to do with safety of our residents in the area and keeping people off of our roads. So.
And Jay, we were proposing to provide them on Union Mill, just to confirm.
Yes.
We were looking for the waiver on Wallace.
Yes, and yes, they are definitely providing them on Union Mill. So we're only talking about the Walton's frontage. Sorry if I did not say that.
Jay, how difficult is the process to put sidewalks in that area there? I mean, is it truly, I mean, it's wetlands, and I'm not familiar with it.
It is wetlands. It is difficult, to be fair. The applicant would have to apply to the DEP to get a permit to install them. It would be.
There's no guarantee of that, correct, Jay? There's no guarantee.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Meredith, do you want to chime in on the sidewalks as the township manager? Your thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts are that we don't really waive sidewalks for anybody. This board has required it, and we've required people first to install it. So I'm not saying that they would be able to get the permit, but there's no reason why they can't try.
And that's been a practice in the past too, is to have the applicants actually show them as part of the approval, approach the state to try to get the permits to install them. If for whatever reason they're unable to obtain them, then the contribution would be made.
Would the applicant agree to that?
We could agree to, make the application. It would, I think I could have Mr. Cornick.
The condition would be, you'd make the application. If DEP approves it, you put the sidewalks in. If they don't, you make a contribution to the township.
I think that's workable, as long as it's not something that, precludes moving forward with the project, because either it happens or we make the contribution, if that's a fair.
So that would be the condition. You make the application to DEP. If they approve it, you put the sidewalks in as part of the application. If they don't approve it, you make the contribution to the township.
Right, and I think part of that discussion also involved, road widening. Here, we're just talking about the sidewalk, and we're
just talking about the sidewalk.
At this time, it's just the sidewalk, right?
Just the sidewalk.
Right.
We are, as the township manager said, we are very big on our sidewalks. So we haven't let anybody, and this board hasn't let anybody off with their sidewalks. So, but we understand that there's a conditional, there's a condition involved that involves the state, and you can't control that, and neither can we. So I just want to make sure the applicant agrees to the proposal that you would put forth the application for the sidewalks on Walton. If you don't get the condition, then you make the contribution to the township.
Right, I mean, I also hate to see any trees removed there. I would like to leave the natural vegetative buffer the way it is, and sidewalk would require removing and carve into that, but we'll agree to pursue the necessary approval from DEP to put it there, and if we cannot get it, we'll have to come back to the issue of compensatory contribution. And again, I reiterate, Mr. Cornick testified about this, and I mentioned the other provision of the code that goes to, you know, considerations germane to whether sidewalk is appropriate there or not. And I still would commend that to the board's consideration, understanding. I know Ms. Tomczyk made her commentary with regard to a firm line the township takes on that. I'm looking at your ordinance, and I think the board has discretion over whether this is an appropriate place for sidewalk or not. But I commend that to the board's consideration when you deliberate.
Again, sidewalks are something we always recommend. It's a site safety issue. I understand the ordinance has some flexibility in it, and as the ordinances do. But there's residential uses along the road.
We also
It's
find
a
that
safety issue.
in industrial areas now, you see it more and more. People are out walking on their lunch hours and everything of that matter. So with trucks in that area and everything else, that's why we push for the sidewalks. Again, if DEP doesn't allow it, that's something that both the applicant and the township has no control over, and then you would just make your contribution to the township fund.
Understood. Not to belabor the point, there's a code section 138-16D pertaining to design standards for subdivisions, and the chart provides an industrial roads. Actually, sidewalks are not required under that chart when subdivision is being designed along industrial roads. And again, it's obviously your discretion. It's in the ordinance whether or not you want to have people on the sidewalk crossing back and forth over a truck entrance. If there's pedestrian access, I will probably look for them to be better off on the other side of the street. But again, something for the board to deliberate over, and I think we've covered all the angles.
And this is not an industrial road. It may be an industrial zone, but it's a township road. It's not part of an industrial subdivision.
Are there any other questions for Jay from the board or for the applicant based on their testimony?
Jay, I made the comment before, there was something before the sidewalks that you had mentioned, whether or not that was an issue for the board, and I apologize, I didn't take better notes.
Other issues in our letter, they've agreed to comply with our lettering.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anybody else from the board have any questions for Jay or the applicant based on their testimony? Okay, I believe, Trish, can you confirm for me, we've come up on our hour and a half?
Yes, we have.
Okay, so I need to poll the board at this time to see if they want to extend this hearing longer. My proposal would be for another hour. Does the board agree? Can I see a showing of hands if you agree to extend this hearing by another hour? Okay, I have the board, all board members are agreeing with a show of hands. So we will continue and we'll move on now to Bill Long's report. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Our report again is dated October 6th. As Mr. Petrungolo noted, we've met with the applicant numerous times. There's been several plan revisions submitted and reviewed. So I'll summarize my letter. On page 3, I talk about a parking variance. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the buffer variance that's required for the basin. We haven't addressed the parking variance. Parking has basically 2 legs. There's the numbers they need to meet, which they do based on their current plan, square footage of the building, et cetera, number of employees. But parking is also required to be paid. So if the board's going to entertain the ghost parking, they have to grant them a variance for not paving the parking. I think the board's past practice has been to address it through the actual number of parking spaces. Grant the variance. Again, it's obviously up to the board, but consider the variance based on the number of ghost parking spaces And then a condition of the site plan approval would be either the township traffic engineer or the zoning officer address parking requirements in the build out of that ghost parking as a condition of the approvals. So I believe that's the way it's been done in the past at the township.
So we would need another variance if we approve the ghost parking.
It would either be for the number, for the ghost parking, the 61, I believe is the number, or not paving those spaces initially. And then a condition of the site plan approval would be for the township traffic engineer, and again, the zoning officer would have the discretion to direct the applicant or property owner at that point to build them based on parking issues on site. So we didn't talk about that. I don't know if there's any additional proofs that need to be addressed for that, but I'll go through my report and then Mr. Baranowski can address that. So that basically summarizes my parking comments. There's a significant amount of fill. Mr. Cornick, if you could address, we have a comment regarding where the fill material is coming from. I don't know if you're at that point in the design process, but obviously the township soil testing ordinance requires that material to be tested. So do you have any idea at this point where that material is coming from, the volumes, et cetera?
No, I mean, Mr. Long, you know that there are a lot of construction projects in the region. It's really, we're not there yet, but we are well intimate with the ordinance requirements. And obviously as a developer, the ownership will want to see where that material is coming from and making sure that it meets the standards of the ordinance and state standards for clean fill. So as a condition, we traditionally ask that those reports be provided to you as the engineer to ensure that that material is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Stormwater management, starting on page 5 of our report through page 8, stormwater management. They are meeting the green infrastructure requirements for the stormwater management. Became effective in March. This is the first large project we've had. If you've looked at the site plan in any detail, you see a number of MTDs. That's one of the new terms, but it's been around for a while. Manufactured treatment devices. There's at least 20 of the filtrary units, which basically look like it's a planted tree, but that is actual structure below grade that actually addresses the stormwater function. So they are complying with the township green infrastructure stormwater management. So again, this is probably the largest site we've looked at since that ordinance was adopted in March. And we're working with the applicant's engineer to address all the comments in our report based on the stormwater management.
Yeah, Mr. Long and I have had a discussion on the stormwater management, and just as this is a large project with these new regulations. Again, this will be scrutinized by the DEP through their stormwater management review as well. And we're confident that, what we have designed meets those conditions. The comments from page 5 through 8 are technical in nature, and all of which we've reviewed and will be able to comply with.
Item 15 in our report, asking about the loading docks. I think early on your testimony this evening, John, was there's 21 loading docks now.
Correct.
So the plan still shows the original 24. I think the architectural rendering showed the 24 as well.
Right.
So the plans and the architectural has
Will need to be
updated.
revised as a condition of approval.
Right.
John, Mr. Cornick mentioned that DEP is involved in the process because of the wetlands on site. So all that documentation needs to be submitted for review. Jay already spoke about lighting fixtures, lighting levels. There is a fixture that's in the middle of a parking field. The township ordinance requires a 5-foot setback from the curb for that fixture. So the fixture the lighting layout can be revised, or a variance could be requested. Or what has happened in the past is they could put an island around that fixture as well to address the setback requirement.
We'll comply with that and revise the plan so we do not require variance.
Okay. And that basically completes our report. Again, we've been working with the applicant's engineer over the last 6 to 8 months on this project.
Does the board have any questions for Bill or for the applicant based on Bill's report?
Madam Chair, I have a general question related to the ghost parking. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for Bill, but the condition is that the township would have a say as to whether that ghost parking gets built out or paved, right? So if the owner sold that property a year or so after it was constructed, does that condition go as part of the
new
Runs
owner.
with the land, so to speak.
comes with the land? Okay,
That's the terms the attorneys use.
okay, great. Thank you.
That's
Appreciate it.
actually a very good point with Bill's requirement that the variance be granted for not paving the phantom spaces, because that variance is what runs with the land. So
Okay.
I think, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, that relief would be basically until they pave them. In other words, you're not granting a variance of those new spaces not being paved once they get installed, it's to not pave the spaces because they're being phantom. Is that
As
correct?
part of tonight's application, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And my question was if the property transferred ownership, does that continue to the new owner?
Yes. Yeah, the variances run with the land, and that's one of
Okay.
the reasons why we'd incorporate.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarification.
And it would be a condition in Mr. Miller's resolution as well.
Any other questions from the board for Bill or for the applicant based on Bill's report? Okay, thank you, Bill. Mike?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My report is dated October 13th, 2021. Again, as was previously stated, we have worked with the applicant's professionals for a number of months on this project. As testimony given earlier, the applicant did agree to providing a post-construction traffic study. Since the applicant can't tell us exactly who the end user is going to be, we want to be sure that they provide the required contribution to roadway improvements in the area, because the site is located in the Transportation Improvement District. As indicated, upon full build, if this site were to get approval and constructed and fully operational, we would work with the applicant's professionals, monitor a traffic study, traffic counts, and we would then assign the trips associated with the site to the adjacent intersections and determine if additional improvements or additional contributions would be required. The applicant did indicate that they would be agreeable to that. So again, any approval given by the board should be definitely be conditioned upon that post construction traffic study.
Mr. Baranowski, the applicant agrees to that on the record?
We do, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, again, as indicated, the firm book access is going to be limited to passenger vehicles only. All truck traffic will be on Walton Avenue. As such, as indicated earlier, the applicant's traffic engineer prepared a revised study. In that study, he provided routes to and from the site. And we're in general agreement, routes, trucks originating from the north, south, and west are expected to enter the site through Bishopsgate Boulevard, Leadenhall Road, and then Walton Avenue. However, as indicated earlier, any trips to the southeast, based on just GPS trip modeling to the site, they're going to come in through Union Mill and then to Walton. That's the route that's given through the GPS software. As indicated, they are going to work with our office to provide additional signage that will alert truck drivers that Walton has a 4-ton weight restriction, and then provide signage to direct them to the desired route. No objection to that. We're just bringing that to the board's attention that any trips from southeast are being directed to Walton Avenue.
So Mike, to clarify for everyone, when you say that would be anybody coming down Union Mill, having crossed over Hartford, heading towards Briggs on Union Mill.
That's correct.
And so the signage is going to hopefully direct them onto Briggs Road to then bring them into
Right. Well,
industrial.
yeah, we've done this in the past. I think we work with the applicant's professionals. We could install signage to alert drivers of the weight restriction on Walton and then direct them to the desired route.
And that there's no
Again,
truck traffic. Well, yeah, there's no entry to that warehouse from Fernbrook because of the design.
well, that too, right. It's going to be twofold. It's going to really, because of the Walton Avenue address, the Fernbrook really isn't in play any longer. Everything's being directed to Walton. So again, the GPS isn't directing them to Fernbrook, they're directing them to Walton only for trips originating from the southeast. So again, we would have to work with the applicant's professionals to make sure adequate signing would be
Is there
proposed.
signage on Walton currently, if you're heading toward Union Mill, before the bridge
That's
that
correct.
says no trucks? Are there currently signs there, or will they be adding signs?
I believe there is signs heading towards Union Mill
South,
indicating the weight
heading south.
restriction on that road.
Okay.
Also, the applicant did prepare conceptual plans indicating improvements at the intersection of Leadenhall and Bishop Gates and Leadenhall and Walton. We're in general agreement that the widening will make those movements possible for the larger tractor trailers. We are concerned that there may be some encroachment on some of the curb lines. The applicant's traffic engineer did indicate that they would work with our office if we need to widen those, increase those radii out there to make sure the truck stays within the roadway. I just want to make it clear that should the board grant any approval for this project, that those improvements be a condition of this approval, and then any infrastructure that's to be relocated or any improvements have to be made will be or solely on the applicant for those improvements. Then just going through my comments, as far as my site plan comments are concerned, Chapter S of the master plan indicates that Walton Avenue has an overall desired width of 40 feet. That's a roadway width. As such, the applicant's constructing a project along one side, they would be required to widen Walton to 20 feet wide, half width. Again, the applicant has indicated that there is some wetlands issues out there that may prevent them from making those improvements. I would also, is similar to the sidewalk requirement, I would suggest we would consider them making the application to the NJDEP for this roadway widening. And if the DEP would permit it, then absolutely we'll have them construct it. That would also require the widening of the bridge, the county bridge in that area. And if the county and the DEP would not permit the widening, and I'm not sure if we can get some sort of in lieu contribution for that widening. But certainly, I think it's necessary that the applicant pursue the permits with the DEP.
Mr. Baranowski, does the applicant agree to that condition?
I can't afford to widen that bridge. I can pursue an approval if the board wants us to cut further into the trees and seek approval from DEP for the road and the sidewalk. I mean, it's all can be, kind of wrapped up in one application. We're not using the bridge. We're proposing to stay away from the bridge. It's the county's bridge. I don't.
Yeah,
I
that'll
don't
be a
think-
county determination. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Baranowski.
That's okay, Mr. Angelastro. No worries. So I don't see that. I don't know if the county wants us touching it. I don't propose to utilize it. So I'd look to not have anything to do with widening the bridge. But we can include an application to widen the road in the application to also add sidewalk within the wetlands and floodplain area. And if that doesn't happen, we'll have to, make a contribution or we can provide the township with the desired road widening dedication. We can certainly agree as a condition. If we can't get a permit to do it, we'll give you the roadway widening width by roadway dedication, as we would. And we could agree to that certainly. And if the township has a better opportunity to receive those permits as a municipality by applying to DEP for those at some point in the future, you'd have the ability then to do so.
Is that okay, Mike?
Yeah, it's fine with me. It's fine. It's up to the board. It's their decision, but that would seem acceptable to me. There's one remaining issue, comment 10 of my letter. It is on page 5. I mistakenly left that in the report. That is no longer relevant to this application, so I withdraw comment number 10 on page 5 of my report. My apologies for reading that in the report. That's all I have in my letter. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Does anybody from the board have any questions for Mike or for the applicant pertaining to Mike's report?
I have questions, please.
Mr. Baskey?
Yeah, Mike, on your report, I guess we can assume that there'll be a certain amount of truck traffic increase from this certain amount of peak, we call them peak hour trips. So it'll bring obviously tractor trailer traffic to the area and to the site. So in your report underneath Part B, the site plan number 2, you say testimony should be provided regarding the performance standards of section 154-56B, that there will be no impact from odors or noise associated with the proposed use. Is that to say that we expect no truck fumes or noise, knowing that there's going to be an increase in truck traffic in this area?
Well, there maybe, again, I'd leave that up to the applicant's professionals to decide on the exact increase in noise levels, but certainly there's going to be increased traffic. There socially associated increase in noise, I would suspect.
Right, but the statement says testimony should be provided that there will be no impact from odors or noise. Number 2 underneath Part B.
Oh, I apologize. I was getting bad. Okay. Yeah, certainly the applicant probably should provide us testimony with that. Again, yeah, we need to provide some testimony on that comment. Apologies.
Okay, I mean, so that question, I guess, would go to the applicant. How could that possibly be attained to have no impacts from fumes or noise from tractor trailers?
Sure, I'd be happy to address that, Mr. Bathke. So your ordinance, Mr. Angelastro's letter refers to is section 154-56. It's entitled in the industrial zoning district provisions. It's entitled use regulations and performance standards. And so there are standards here, and a list goes on that, dust, fumes, vapors, mists, gases, fly ash, odors. Basically, the ordinance is geared toward prohibiting introduction of like a noxious use, excessive light and heat, excessive vibrations, smoke, sound. It's not to say that this is, a sleeping, cotton ball. This is nothing that would violate these performance standards is okay. So in the industrial zoning district, while industrial uses are permitted, they're subject to these performance standards, and we'll certainly have to comply with them. Any use that will go in there has to comply with these performance standards.
And can I add to that, Bob, if you don't mind?
Please.
I think the way that the comment's written is not reflective of what your ordinance states. So I think the inaccuracy there, it says that there will be no impact. As Bob had stated, you have performance standards. They're looking at noxious fumes, things that could occur. They also say things such as sound, and there's a state law with regards to sound at the property line. And if the town has an appropriate ordinance, then that sound law can be enacted. So I think that the statement is essentially written wrong in the comment, and we meet the standards, the performance standards under that ordinance.
Just for clarification, the ordinance has sound standards in it, and you're saying you're going to comply to those sound standards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The ordinance does say for other areas that there shall be no impact for dust, fumes, vapor, fly ash, et cetera, mists, smoke, light, heat, ground vibrations. So there's a standards for the sound, but there's not necessarily a standard for dust. Your testimony, and I know we discussed this frankly at the first meeting. This was something that was discussed at the first meeting, your testimony, and I believe your testimony was that there would be no impact to dust, fumes, vapors, gas, mists, et cetera, these requirements of the ordinance. Is that the case?
That is the case.
Yeah. And to add to that, to Mr. Cormack's confirmation of that, Mr. Petrangelo, I mean, again, we could read, it's a long ordinance. Some of the
language is somewhat arcane. But there are standards that are in some cases subjective, like dust, fumes, vapors, mist, gas, fly ash, or odors should not be allowed to be discharged into the atmosphere in such quantities or at such levels as to cause injury, detriment, or annoyance to person or other properties or endanger their comfort, repose, health, or safety in such quantities or at such levels as to cause property damage or damage to agriculture on other properties. I mean, this, we're talking about, again, like an old, really it's sounding in common law, and maybe even if Mr. Miller wants to join us in the colloquy, these are standards that would go to noxious types of uses that would constitute nuisances. This is like a codification of a nuisance. So what we're saying here is that they're subject to standards so as not to cause a nuisance. If you're saying it can't have one funky smell on one day or one loud sudden noise emanate one time from a dock area, that's not the standard. And that's my read on it. And I think we can confirm we'll be subject to these standards under the ordinance, and the user will have to adhere to them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. A truck passing by is going to kick up some dust particles. The question is it to the point of being detrimental to the adjacent properties or agriculture, et cetera, et cetera? And
And I
again,
think,
your
I think it might have to
testimony-
do with hauling as well. So you're not gonna have trucks that are hauling in ash or debris that would be flying
Right.
out of the truck and causing problems.
Correct. And I think that the ordinance, again, is geared toward, what happens at the property. But, Madam Chair, certainly to your point, a vehicle associated with this facility couldn't come flying down the street and letting things loose upon the neighborhood. That would be a problem, and that this ordinance provides that can't happen. And that the type of facility we're proposing here is subject to these performance standards, and it'll have to comply.
Yeah, and you've indicated you will comply.
Correct.
Yes, and that's what I would add, Madam Chair, and to members of the board, that's the applicant has represented that they would comply with the ordinance. And that's now part of the record and will certainly be part of the resolution.
Okay. Mr. Bathke, do you have any other questions for Mike or the applicant?
I do for the applicant, maybe a follow-up to Mr. Baranowski. With Mr. McGinnis's report, where he talks about underneath his report, table 3, tractor trailer distribution, there'd be 0% of tractor trailer distribution on Union Mill going east and west. But there was testimony earlier that if you had a tractor trailer approaching this area from the southeast, he would have to use Union Mill to get there.
Yeah,
I think what they were trying to say is that with GPS, the way it
Right.
is, I think this is what Mike was trying to clarify too, is that sometimes when you go on GPS, because of the address, it
Right.
might send them down Union Mill. The proposed signage that
Right.
they're gonna put at Briggs Road will redirect them back up Briggs Road. I'm not sure how much traffic. It would depend on how much is coming from that client that's using the warehouse would be coming down Union Mill that way. But hopefully the redirecting of traffic at Briggs Road with the signage will prevent them from going any further down the road.
That's correct, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And Mike, is it your opinion that this increased signage is effective in controlling this kind of traffic?
It will be effective to a certain extent. Again, will it prevent 100% of the truck drivers
Right.
not going down Union Mill?
Right.
There's always, I can't say for certain, but it would seem reasonable that maybe you'll get one going down that road. I don't know. It's hard to say, but again, signage does work. We have to put it in advance of Walton Avenue, let them know that the weight restrictions in effect and to follow the desired route. Again, to say, no one can say within 100% certainty that a truck will never go down that road. No one can say that, but we will do our best through signage to prevent that from happening.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Does anybody else from the board have any questions for Mike or the applicant?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. So, Mike, you indicated that, as you stated, right, we don't really know who the tenant is going to be for this property. And the applicant has indicated, hey, it could be a small manufacturing company, et cetera, but there are 21 bays, truck bays that are across the back of the building, right? So if a tenant did come along that was going to fully use that, generally, my experience, small manufacturing companies aren't going to use 21 bays, right? So if it became more, of a type of facility that would fully utilize those bays, does the truck analysis or the traffic analysis take that into account?
Well, what the traffic analysis did was assume, based on ITE's trip generation rates for warehouse. And then again, there are national standards. And it's very typical to apply those ITE rates to a project in New Jersey. As we indicated in our report, that since we don't know who the end user is going to be, that's why we're asking them to do a post-construction traffic study to account for the very situation you just mentioned. Maybe you'll get a higher use user, maybe somebody with more trucks, or maybe it might be somebody with less trucks. But again, we'll know for sure if this project gets approval, gets constructed. Once it's fully operational, we'll conduct a study. We'll assign those trips to the adjacent roadway network. If they're required to provide a contribution in accordance with the Transportation Improvement District, they will do so. Also, if any other additional roadway improvements are required, then again, they're going to be required to do that to make their site work.
Okay, so as an example, make sure I'm not muting. Okay, so as an example, so let's say that is the exit from the facility currently directing all traffic to go to the right on Walton Avenue?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's say in the future that bridge, right, that's there gets replaced, right? Does that change? Does that require the applicant to come back? I mean, is that a condition of use that says all traffic in the future has to exit to the right? And let's say the county replaces that bridge, right? Does that change the use? And I'm asking the question because obviously this is a little bit.
Would the plan have to be changed at that point? Because so they'd have to come back to the board because the plan would have to be, because right now the plan is set for them only to make a right out of that site. So for them to change that, they would have to come back to this board. Am I correct on that? Can I get it?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can address that just from a legal standpoint. If the board approves the application, but the application includes the provision, it's been testified to by the applicant's team that the egress to Walton Avenue would be a right out only to Walton Avenue. And of course, the resolution would state as such. If circumstances change and the applicant wished to change that feature, then yes, they would have to come back to the board for approval from the board to change that provision of the approval that was granted by the board.
And they would have another hearing, just so the public's aware as well. So if this application were to be approved tonight and something changes and they want to change the site plan, they have to come back to the board for a public hearing where the public would be able to comment and ask questions.
That is
correct. Thank you. Yep. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the board members for Mike or the applicant? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Brian, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair and planning board members. My letter is dated October 13th, 2021. I've had the chance to work with the applicant over the past several months, and my letter is a couple, two small minor comments in regard to the updated plans. It's comment number one is just to relocate the hydrant that's on like the northeast side of the building, just within 50 feet of the FDC. And that the second comment number two is that the parking spot right in front of the fire department connection where the building is to be marked striped a fire zone so we can have better access to that fire department connection.
Does the applicant agree to that?
Yes.
Okay, that's the only comments that I have. I'll be glad to answer any other comments that the board has.
Does the board have any questions of the fire marshal? Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Brian. So at this time, I'm going to open this hearing up. It is a public hearing to the public. I want to remind the public that anybody who speaks has to be on video. That is a requirement of these Zoom calls. I also ask, because of time constraints, that if someone asks the question you were going to ask, that you not then speak and ask the same question, just so we can get to as many questions and cover as much of the topics as possible. So I just ask that we don't duplicate questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I heard the applicant say, warehouse is a permitted use about a dozen times. Can we just, for the public, explain what that means? Like, what are the implications of a warehouse being a public, permitted use in this area? Maybe Jay can.
Jay or
Jay to
John,
explain.
Jay, do you want to address that
Yes,
before we go to public?
under our ordinance, and under our master plan, this site is zoned industrial. And the industrial uses permit or allow, as part of the ordinance, a warehouse facility. There's a series of permitted uses, permitted uses include general industrial districts for primarily for the providing of space for manufacturing, processing, fabricating, repairing, storing, and wholesaling. Then there's some other permitted uses, for example, an office or bank, restaurant, convenience store, lodging, assembly halls, libraries, childcare. So the ordinance is set up under the municipal land use law, and we're all governed by the municipal land use law. The ordinance is set up that it allows certain uses to be in each individual zone. And this is a decision made at governing body level, council level. It's not made at the planning board level. Those uses become something that basically the township's governing body has said you're allowed to do here. The planning board, what you're looking at as the board is the site plan and the uses presented and the standards of our ordinance to ensure that an applicant's complying with those standards, or that if they're not complying, are the variances or waivers as presented justified. But you're not looking at the use itself. You're not saying, is this use appropriate for this lot or not? That was done by the governing body. We have to abide by that. So the question is, are the impacts from that use per our ordinance being addressed? Is the applicant addressing our parking standards? Is the applicant addressing the buffer standards? Are they addressing the roadway improvements, sidewalk improvements? Are they complying with the remaining ordinance standards in Mount Laurel's ordinance? But when a use is permitted, if the use was not permitted, for example, this applicant would be proceeding before the zoning board, and they would need to get what's referred to as a use variance. They would have to get a supermajority approval of the board after a public hearing. That's not the case here. Again, you don't zone as the planning board. That's not your job. You prepare the master plan, and then the governing body reviews that master plan and prepares the zoning ordinances. Again, this was recently, we had prepared an amendment to our master plan. This area was not changed from the zoning so that it is an industrial district and the use is permitted. So we're not really looking at whether or not the use of a warehouse for this facility is or is not appropriate for this area. That's not in our purview. So does
Thank
that
you.
help, Mr. Nyack? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think Mr. Nyack wanted to just clarify that for the public before we get to the public portion.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, as I mentioned before, if you're a member of the public and you'd like to speak, what you're going to be asked to do is turn off your microphone, and then our solicitor will have to swear you in. So I see, I apologize, I don't see everybody at once, but I see is it Etner? Dr. Etner? Okay, so if you could unmute yourself, and then
you, Madam Chair.
our board solicitor has to swear you in.
Good evening. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this hearing?
I do.
Thank you very much, sir. Please state your name, spell your name, and provide your address.
Sure. First name is Jay. Last name is Eitner, Eitner. Address is 7 Fulton Drive here in Mount Laurel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to proceed before asking questions. I always have to go on the record for the state. I am not representing myself as a superintendent of schools. I am not representing my school district. I am just Jay, who lives on Fulton Drive. That being
And
said,
Mr. Edner, could you just clarify for everybody, is Fulton Drive over in the Millstream section
Fulton Drive is off of Mill Stream, right by Union Mill.
between Union Mill and Walton on the other side of Union Mill,
Yes, Madam
on the
Chairman.
southern side of Union Mill? Okay.
That's correct, Madam Chairman. All right. I served on a planning board for 9 years before moving down to Mount Laurel. And I'm definitely not the end all be all, but Mr. Miller, you are the board solicitor?
Yes, sir.
All right, just a very quick question. If I remember my days on the planning board, this board could vote no and not approve this project. And Mr. Baranowski could easily appeal, and this would go to the county, correct?
If the board
If this
did
board
not,
votes no, and there's an appeal.
no, I'm trying to answer your question.
Thank you.
If the board votes to deny the application,
Correct.
The applicant has the right to appeal that determination
Right.
in Superior Court.
Okay. So what I remember in my time is that if we go that way, I've seen in my past practice as a board member that Superior Court can just reject this on the basis of we have no right to approve, or you have no right to reject this, and it would get kicked back to the township, correct?
That is pure speculation.
Okay.
I stated the procedure for if the application is denied, and then as far as the next steps that the applicant have the rights to appeal the denial if they wish. That's the procedure, period, number one. Number two, under the municipal land use law, the members of the public are entitled and have the right to ask questions or comments to the applicant about the application. So I think
Understood.
as far as any possible court action in the future, I don't think it's appropriate, number one, and then number two, and I don't think it's relevant.
I'm just scared that
I would, under the municipal land use law in section 10, the board can restrict irrelevant information. And I would advise the board that really any other speculation really as far as the court is exactly that, and it's not relevant to this proceeding. And Mr. Etner, am I saying that correctly? Etner, is that true?
Eitner. You're good.
Eitner. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Mr. Eitner, I would encourage you as your time for the public, to provide questions or comments to the applicant on the application.
Understood. I'm just.
Mr. Miller, may I add to that, please? I would, if I may, just to your point,
Of
I
course.
would hope that nobody uses this as an opportunity to attempt to filibuster or to make
Absolutely
irrelevant comments.
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Thank
I'm
you.
just afraid that this
100%.
gets denied. And I know we have a plethora of requests and stipulations in place. And I'm just absolutely petrified that would all just go away should any type of appeal take place. But just very quickly, I'm absolutely mortified by the amount of ingress and egress and imperviousness. Just two major questions at this point, though. Was an LOI obtained at any point, or did anybody ask for an LOI on the study of the property?
Talking about a wetlands LOI?
Yeah.
So I can take that, Bob. But yes, we do have an active LOI, Mr. Eitner. And it was approved by the state and it identified the wetlands and the wetland buffers on site.
Thank you. And just the last question, how many lights are we looking at on the total property in terms of pole lights?
The pole lights are in accordance with the township ordinance as indicated and will comply with the planner's review.
Do we have a
Do you
number
know how
on
many,
that?
does anybody know what the number is on that?
I'd have to look it up. If you go to the next comments, I'll be sure to have it in the next discussion.
Yeah, we didn't count the number of lights. We looked at the intensity of the lights. So
Okay.
And the
Understood. Thank you
intensity
very
of the
much.
lights, they've agreed for the intensity of the lights to meet the township requirement or the township recommendation, which was that 0.02 candle light
at the property line, yes.
at the property line. So that'll prevent the light from extending beyond that in the surrounding area.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Do
to
you have
the
any
board.
other questions?
No, ma'am. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chairman.
Anybody else from the public? Okay, let me go to my next page. I have a Jody Chatton. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
So if you could just, our solicitor is going to swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this hearing?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please state, spell your name, and provide your address for the record.
My name is Jody Chatton, Chattin. My address is 1122 Union Mill Road.
Thank you.
And Ms. Chatton, can you just, based on that address, where on Union Mill are you located to give the applicant an idea?
I'm located between Academy and Church Street.
Okay, so you're down past Elbow Lane.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a question. I actually have a statement to read more than a question.
No,
Am I allowed to do that?
excuse me. No, I'm going to object to reading of anybody else's statement. That's not subject to it's hearsay. It's not subject to cross-examination. So I object to you reading any statements from anybody else.
This is my own statement of the impact on myself. Am I
Right,
allowed to read that?
Yeah, your words I have no objection to. If you're going to read a statement that other people have signed, or you have petitions, or you have other neighbor comments, I would object to that.
No, I don't have that.
All right, thank you.
And this, just state for the record, is that if there are hearsay comments, there are statements that I agree with Mr. Baranowski, that's something that the board cannot consider.
The only
Having said that, Ms. Chatton, please go right ahead.
Okay. The only thing I do have are some quotes from studies. Is that allowed?
I don't know how you're qualified to introduce quotes from studies and where the studies are coming from. And if you're, I can't have an opportunity to review whatever studies you're referencing. I don't think there's a foundation for you to testify about things you glean from studies if you're not an expert witness.
Okay. I'll just proceed with my statement, and if you have any objection, feel free to give it. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a tax-paying Mount Laurel resident, I'm strongly opposed to the Union Mill Road warehouse project, as well as overdevelopment in any form. My husband and I moved to Mount Laurel almost 9 years ago in 2012. There are many things that we love about Mount Laurel, things that have been planned out well. The parks are wonderful. The school system is fantastic. Our police force and emergency services are amazing. There's convenient and interesting shopping and access to world-class medical care. Last year, Mount Laurel was even ranked one of the top 50 best places in the US to live by Money Magazine. 9 years ago, I could drive around Mount Laurel and see a fair amount of open space. In that 9 years, the open space around Briggs Road has been built up, the area around Centerton Square has been covered in stores and parking lots, and there's currently another new housing complex being built within walking distance of my house. I'm sure we could list more. Traffic has increased, and according to macrotrends.net, so has crime. The construction of a 76,000 square foot warehouse in a largely residential area will not improve the situation. What kind of township do we as residents want? I'm genuinely curious about what the perceived benefit to the community would be for this warehouse project. I'm assuming tax dollars would be generated and probably jobs. I can't imagine many other benefits. Business is important, but there are intangible qualities about a community that are more important. I appreciate the response to the concerns at the previous meeting by the developer, but they don't seem to substantively change the primary issue of warehouse sprawl, which is a big problem in New Jersey and particularly in Burlington County this year. I'm sure that the project managers at Core One Industrial, the out-of-state company pursuing this project, are fine people who are just doing their jobs. But after this warehouse is built, they can go back home to Connecticut or Haddonfield or wherever they're from and collect their paychecks from yet to be determined warehouse tenants. They don't have to drive our roads to and from work every day with tractor trailers and potholes. They don't have to worry about additional pollutants in the air when they send their kids to the soccer field around the corner. They don't have to think about the deer, birds, and other wildlife that will be scared off by additional development. They don't have to worry about tractor trailer traffic driving past a special needs school on Walton Road every day. They don't have to concern themselves with lower property values when they decide to sell their homes. But we do. And if this is built, we will for the next 5 years, 10 years, and 50 years, because once it's there, it will always be there. If this kind of development is allowed now or in the future, Mount Laurel will quickly lose its appeal and not be the wonderful place to live that it is now. I realize that a lot of time and money have already been spent on this project, and that I'm coming to the table rather late on this issue. I also understand that this area is technically zoned for industrial use and is permitted use, but is it the best use? It's not too late to consider the long-term ramifications of overdevelopment and especially of warehouse development. Let us, as stewards of the future, recognize now when it is time to stop. I urge the planning board members to resist the lure of overdevelopment in any form and to vote to discontinue the Union Mill Warehouse project. Thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Chatton.
Yes.
I just want to confirm, I think you answered the question before to the chairwoman about where exactly you live. If I Google your address and I drop a pin on the site, would you agree that it would be accurate, as Google is showing me, that you live 2.8 miles away from the project site?
That sounds about right, yes.
Okay, and you live close to Marlton, really, in your location, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you live close to the shopping center where the Randolph's Bakery is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And another shopping center where the True Value store is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so you live in an area of Mount Laurel that's right on the border with Marlton, near some other retail centers, and nowhere near the property, correct? The subject property.
I frequently drive down that road and use all parts of Mount Laurel. So it would affect my life in terms of living and as well as polluting the general area,
Yeah. Oh, you know,
as well as my property.
I didn't notice that you had been qualified as an expert in pollution, but you mentioned it's going to drop your property values, but your property is nowhere near the subject site, right?
Well, I mean,
Excuse me,
point
Robert,
isn't that far.
Robert,
Yes, sir.
excuse me.
Sir.
We're gonna just let the Mount Laurel residents speak so that they,
Okay.
and
I
I
just wanna say
understand it as an attorney for the applicant, you want to question people, but we want to make sure that everybody can get their questions in and that way.
Just requesting, please refrain from snarky or sarcastic comments to a resident. Thank you.
Well, respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I think, you know, we have a lot of darts being thrown here that really have no foundation in fact, or and it's unsubstantiated testimony. So I wanted to address that. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
And the board, you know, even though we are volunteers, we've done this for a while, and so, you know, we like to make sure that all the residents have a right to speak, and you know, so. Is there anything else, Ms. Chatton?
No, I believe that's all. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak? I have Terry and Steve. I'm sorry, I don't have your last name showing up for me.
Haslett.
Haslett, okay, so if you could unmute. And
Are we
then
unmuted?
there you go, and then our solicitor will direct you from there for swearing in. John, you're muted, John.
I apologize,
downfall
Madam
of
Chair.
Zoom.
Okay, we're going to be swearing you both in?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
the only thing I would ask is just for the record, please, after you give your name and address, please speak one at a time and not over each other. We are required under the municipal land use law to make a recording, and I just want to encourage no speaking over another, just so we can get an accurate recording of the proceeding. Thank you. Having said that, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during this hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you both. Please state and spell your names to the record and provide your address.
Terry Hassett, Hassett. My address is 345 Walton Avenue.
Thank you,
And,
and sir.
Stephen Hassett, Hassett, that's PH, Stephen, STPHEN. Also 345 Walton Avenue.
And just
Thank
for
you.
the record, can you clarify where on Walton Avenue you live?
Ask Mr. Baranowski to drop a pin.
They're across the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were from the aerial view, we're the fifth house, we're in the middle house of the 5 houses on the north side of Union Mill on Walton Avenue.
We're between.
You're between
and
Union
Market.
Mill and the bridge.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Can we proceed?
You can proceed, yes.
Thank you. We've lived here for approximately 20 years, and starting around 2006, we've been up at the township trying to get the traffic reduced on our street. And contrary to what the one gentleman said about the traffic and tractor trailers, you know, that the signage and that.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Can all the public anybody else please be on mute? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Should I continue?
Go ahead. Continue. Yes.
We've been up at the township for about 5-6 years with the traffic issue. And one of the gentlemen said, you know, he can't completely say that anybody coming off Union Mill will not make a right, you know, any tractor trailers, maybe 1 or 2 would get through. Well, every day there's tractor trailers currently going over the Fort Tom Bridge. Signage does not work. And to me, it's evident by there's the cul-de-sac at Moore Avenue that prohibits any of Bishopsgate's traffic from going through Pheasant Mere. And when I pulled all of those records back in 2006, really the township said signage doesn't work. So they installed cul-de-sac, just like where the Wawa is on Church Street. The signage doesn't work. And we have tractor trailers being up and down the street now. Our quality of life, safety, I have a group home right next door, Bancroft Group Home. We have a daycare. We have the residential Bancroft. And I don't think anybody would want this in their neighborhood. No one. I mean, you know, this is really going to exacerbate an already existing problem. And I just think, you know, there's a lot of reports and a lot of experts. We're living it. We're living it 20 years and it's only gotten worse. And this will be installed, and you know, all the fixes are after it's installed, you know, and it's just, I don't think it's fair to us, really. I mean, we do have a lot of Bishopsgate traffic, but this is really going above and beyond, in my opinion. And if you don't live here and you're looking at, you know, traffic studies and everything, you're just not living it every day. So, you know, I just think that it's really bad for Walton Avenue, the residents, the township. I think unless you're here and you're living it every day, you don't know. You don't know. You can say they're going to go this way, that way. I'm here in the mornings till 11 o'clock. I see it. I'm all, you know, there's just traffic constantly and they're tractor trailers. So that's what I would say. And signage does not work. That's why you put a cul-de-sac, and that's why Pheasant Mere insisted on that cul-de-sac. And that's why Wawa didn't put signs on Church Road. They put a barrier. Nobody's gonna look. There's a 4-ton sign now, and people just come over. So, and with the daycare, the Bancroft residential and group home, I mean, you're trying to put an elephant in a keyhole and just push this big industrial project where it really isn't a good fit. It's just not a good fit. And I know how it's zoned, But, last meeting in August, it was going to be 50% Fernwood, 50% Walton. Then in that exact same meeting, there was some backpedaling. Well, there'll be someone Fernwood. Now, Fernwood's not even in the picture. Walton, again, is taking the front of everything. And it's just not fair. That's really all I have to say.
So obviously I agree with my wife. I work for a building supply company down in Gloucester City, and I imagine from what all the conversation has been is that's the type of facility that they would be looking to lease this property to. During the course of a regular day, we probably get, so we deliver, we produce, we deliver, or we receive product and we ship product. So probably during the course of the day, we get 10, 15 tractor trailers coming into our facility, unloading, loading and unloading. And then we load our own trucks. I imagine that's the kind of facility they're going to be operating on there. My questions would be, is it a 24/7 type of operation that's going to be running out of there? Is it going to be just 5 days a week? Are they going to be running their own fleet? Are they going to be fueling on site? Are they going to have repairs done on site? All this kind of stuff, it just adds to the traffic down Walton Avenue. And I love the idea of this proposed signage when somebody's heading southeast or whatever it is on Union Mill Road. That we're going to put up a sign. What's it going to say? You got to turn here for Joe's Cabinets? I mean,
We just lost you. I don't know if they can hear us. We just lost you. We can't hear him. We lost you. I don't. Trish, do you still have a connection with that?
signage does not work.
There you go. I'm sorry. We lost you for a little while.
Okay.
We lost you after you said the sign for Joe's Cabinets.
Yeah, that was Joe. It's just not going to work. You can't. A tractor trailer driver that's driving to make a delivery to whatever the name of the company is not going to look for the sign. Where do I turn? Where do I turn? If he misses the turn, his GPS is going to tell him to turn down Walton Avenue. I don't care what you say. It's not going to stop. And it's up and down and up and down. And this idea of widening the road and the bridge, what that's going to lead to the comment about it not affecting the woman's property value on 1122 Union Mill Road, it's going to affect the property value on the people that live on this street. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Baranowski, Mr. Haslett had a question about operation. Does the applicant know what their planned operation would be? Is it 7 days a week, 5 days a week? What kind of hours? I mean, none of that has been addressed. I know that there's no tenant proposed, but what is the applicant looking for as far as hours and?
It would be consistent with what's permitted by ordinance. You know, if this type of business in the township is required to maintain certain hourly operations, then we'll follow it. Whatever the hourly restrictions would be by ordinance, those would be, were followed by the operator. I also, Madam Chair, wanted to make sure that the Hassetts understood that there's no truck traffic that's proposed to be directed through their section of Walton. They're south of our driveway. We're bringing everybody in from the other direction. And I think there was discussion of an occasional truck, which the Hassetts say already happens. And we've seen the signs out there. There are tiny signs, and we're proposing to significantly improve the signage. And we are not proposing to direct any trucks to go past their section of road. I think what we're actually proposing is an enhancement to their area to further restrict and put better signage for trucks to avoid going down that section of road. So I would submit we're proposing an improvement and not a detriment.
Well, I never proposed you were encouraging traffic to go that way. I'm just saying that it's going to happen. You can't control.
And Mr. Hassett, to your point about, I'm sorry,
I would
interrupt you. There was lag.
If I may just say something, just to remind everyone about the ground rules. It's not really a give and take with the public. There are questions and answers, and so again, it's not really a give and take. But now that I've said that, Mr. Baranowski, I do just to add to the chair's question. Mr. Hassett, just have a question about fueling or repairs on the site. And I was just wondering, you've addressed as far as the hours, and I was just wondering if you or maybe one of your team addressed, what fueling or repairs would that occur on the site?
We do not have any provisions for on-site fueling.
Okay. And he also mentioned repairs.
Yeah, I don't anticipate, good, John.
Just to clarify, this is not an application for vehicular repairs. It is an application for warehousing. If the applicant was doing vehicular repair on site, other than, standard emergency type stuff, but if they were doing vehicular repair, that would be opposed to the site plan, and it's actually not a permitted use as repair.
And same with fueling.
Same with fueling.
Okay, Jay, do we have any hours that are posted for industrial?
Do not.
No.
The only we have is noise standards that they would have to apply with.
It sort of appears that all of the fixes, once there's problems, the building's already going to be there, the trucks are already going to be coming down the road, and all the fixes, are after the building's there. And I'm not saying that it's not zoned for that. That it's not zoned for, say, commercial or industrial. I just think with the track, you're encouraging more tractor trailers. That's what you're encouraging. It's not. That's how I feel about it. I think a lot of the fixes you're talking about, we'll do this. It's all after the building's in there and everything's all up, and and then they sell and then they go somewhere else, and now we're just stuck this. And you really just have to understand, because you just don't live here. Like, who comes over and takes a look, and who was over here to look at this? This is day in and day out. So.
Do you have any more questions or comments for the board or the applicant?
No.
We've hit our hour extension, so I have to pull the board again for an additional extension. I'm going to pull the board for an additional half hour. Can I see a show of hands who agrees to allow the hearing to continue to go for another half hour? Let me see who else I have. Mr. Pizzo, I don't have Mr. Baskey. So if you agree to go another half hour, if you could just raise your hand for me so that I know.
1, 2, 3.
I'm just keep your hands up for me, because I have to switch screens to see everybody.
I don't see. Oh,
I don't see
Jasper?
Mr. Did I lose Mr. Cassidy?
Yeah, I don't see him either. We have Mike, Councilwoman, the Township Manager, the Mayor.
So
Mr.
I have
Baskey, and Mr. Nyack.
I lost Mr. Cassidy. Okay. Trish, will you make a note for the record that, because you don't see him as well, that Mr. Cassidy has dropped off of the meeting. Okay. Okay, so we have the majority.
Madam Chair, do we know when he dropped out?
I have
Or
no
when
idea.
he passed?
I have no idea. I
We have,
don't see him.
we have alternates on that are.
We do
that
have
are-
alternates
Okay.
on. So
Okay.
Scott is the first alternate. So Scott, if you could go on camera for us, please, because you've been a part of the hearing the whole time. If we can get Scott on. Scott Troilo. Scott, can you go on camera?
I don't see Scott.
I don't see Scott. Ramesh, can you go on camera, please? I apologize to the public. This is one of the downfalls of Zoom is we have to comply with the regulations. So I have to make sure all the board members are on camera before we proceed any further. Trish, do you have a number to call them to ask them to get on camera? I don't know.
Yep.
I apologize again.
Trish, mute yourself and call them and
I can walk across the street, knock on Scott's door.
Madam Chair, this is John Miller. I don't know
Yes.
if you wanted to take, say, a 5-minute break or so while we get people back on, but that's your call.
Yeah, for right now, I just want to keep everybody on because I'm afraid if I take a 5-minute break, then I'm going to lose those people who get off the 5.
Okay.
I do want to note, though, for the record, that we had a majority of the board members that were present who raised their hand to continue the application.
Ramesh, can you hear us? I see that you're on, just not on video.
I constantly have that, but bear with me, I'll get there. Ah, la, 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 la. Integrated webcam, right?
Just at the bottom right-hand side, it should say start video.
And also, Scott, I see that you're still here. If you could get on camera.
I can see myself, but let me see, 1 minute.
Trish, can you send them a thing to start their video so that they just have to hit yes?
And I apologize to the public and the applicant, but under the requirements, we have to make sure all board members are on camera.
Now?
I have him sharing the screen, so I lost everybody else, Trish.
Trish, can you just unshare his screen?
When we do that, we lose his video.
Let me just try one more way. You folks hang on, I'll just log in again, okay?
Well, if you just go to the bottom left where it says stop video, you should see a line through it. Just click on that. Just click on that little camera and your video should open up.
I seem to always have that nonsensical problem with my. Should I go to video settings and see something?
Does where it says stop video, is there a red diagonal line through it?
Yeah, it is, and I'm clicking
All
it.
right, so hold on, just click on that. Just click on it. You don't need to click on the up arrow, just click on the little camera right above it.
Yeah, that's where I'm clicking.
Just click it once.
Yeah, just click it once.
Mr.
And-
Cassidy cannot get back on. He lost charge to his phone.
Okay. What about Scott?
Give me 1 minute for Scott. I have to switch back and forth to another screen.
Yeah, Vanessa, you
There we
should
go.
have
Scott's on. Hi, Scott. Okay, we got
Hello.
Scott on. So that's the I have a majority at this point then. Okay.
That was fun.
All right. Back to the public portion. I apologize to everybody. So we've agreed to extend this another half hour for public portion. I have a Matthew Severs who has a hand raised. So if you could unmute and then if you could take your hand down and then our Mr. Miller will swear you in.
Hello.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please state and spell your name and provide your address for the record.
My name is Matthew Severs, Severs, and I live at 9 Millstream Drive.
Thank you, sir.
So I have 3 questions and or concerns in particular. The first of these is the fact that most of the truck traffic will be coming out of Union Mill, coming off of Leadenhall and going down Briggs Road, correct? Because they will be trying to turn left onto the 38 to get to 295. Is that not correct? Either Robert or Daniel.
They can also take a right on Route 38 and use the Briggs Road jug handle.
Okay. That intersection that now exists there is extraordinarily busy with pedestrian traffic that is all coming out of the new Jefferson Apartments. that intersection is not designed probably to have a significant number of traffic coming from, particularly from truck traffic. So that's really the first big concern. The other concern that also deals with the traffic is the fact that even in your own estimates, you said that trucks that are coming from the southeast will be sent down Union Mill. That particular section would be connecting from Briggs over to Hartford. And I think every single resident here can attest that that's probably one of the worst sections of road here in the entire town. That section is also one of the ones that frequently floods and is closed on a routine basis. So how does the project deal with this in the first place? So that's my first question.
Sure. Mr. Severs, before Mr. McGinnis might want to add any further testimony to it, I've addressed some of this and these legal issues arising from your comment and question in the letter I wrote to Mr. Miller, and maybe at some point we can have him address this to the board too. But something off-site away from the property that is an existing traffic condition can't be a reason for this board to find that the location of the site and the proposed use is not suitable, because as Mr. Petrungolo aptly pointed out, it's a permitted use at this site. And these are municipal roads. If it needs to be repaired because it's not in good condition, it has drainage issues, it's an issue the municipality is going to need to address. It doesn't mean that trucks can't come from this site and drive on that municipal road. And I'd leave to Mr. McGinnis if he has anything to add to that.
So I would just add that based on the analyses we've prepared and submitted, trucks seeking to turn around via Briggs Road are more likely to use Leadenhall Route 38 and take the jug handle to make that turn. So not headed toward that Jefferson Mount Laurel development.
Right, but that Jefferson Mount Laurel development is right across the street from there. And there are a large number of pedestrians that use that intersection to walk down Union Mill Road. Most of us who live in this area commonly are either traveling by bike or walking or running down Union Mill or going down Briggs Road itself. We also are very common to go down Walton itself. So that's just my first concern, is all dealing with the traffic. My second concern is, I'm a geology professor, and one of the biggest questions that I have with this is the whole need to regrade this, bring in additional amounts of clean fill, which we don't know where it's coming from. And second of all, the fact of the matter is that you're dealing with two different sandy soil units there, because the Coleman Town and the Crescent don't behave exactly the same. So you're dealing with a serious issue of the fact that whatever clean fill has to be able to work with both of those two different soil types. And it's not necessarily the same thing. So is there any kind of way of addressing that concern?
Mr. Severs, again, I could have Mr. Cornick give some further testimony, but Mr. Long has reviewed the issue of stormwater. Mr. Cornick has reviewed it. They're both licensed professional engineers in the state of New Jersey that testified that the stormwater management design will be workable. And as far as any fill coming to the site, state law requires we have to know where it's coming from, and it has to be clean fill. That's regulated by state law, so we have to comply with that.
Correct, but you don't know where it's coming from at this time.
Mr. Severs, I don't know today where exactly what spot on earth the fill will come from, but I have to make sure when I do get it, I have to know where it comes from, and it has to be tested and it has to be clean.
So Mr. Severs, as long as they're complying with the state law, that's all they're required to do. And that our professionals, Mr. Long, will make sure that they're complying with that state law if the application is approved.
Okay.
And to add to that, utilization of our best management practices in construction with importing of fill is a common practice. So I'm not quite certain that your concerns are absolutely necessary in this development.
My final concern is the fact that you're taking an environment that's already in its natural state and significantly altering it. And I know that the stormwater plan for today says that it's capable of handling it. We're dealing with significant changes in our climate. And the fact of the matter is that every single model that's out there is indicating that we're going to get increased rainfall. The stormwater plans of today are not going to apply and work 10, 20 years from now. They just are not.
Just so you understand, Mr. Severs, they have to comply with what the regulations are today. So as a board, we can't overrule them on what we anticipate it being down the road. We have to go by what the standards are today. That's what our hands are held to, and there's nothing we can do about that. We're required to follow, just like with parking. We all know, I've lived in Mount Laurel. I grew up in Mount Laurel. I've talked about this before in other hearings. You know, the traffic has changed. The towns around us have changed. That's changed the traffic. We know how it goes. I've sat on applications where we've looked at a parking lot and said, this isn't a really good parking lot, but if it meets the standards, we're limited as to what we can do unless the applicant agrees to do it. So if they're meeting the standards that are set today, then that's what they're held to. If they don't build, this application's approved and they don't build for 2 years, whatever the standards are at that time is what they'll be held to. And
okay,
I understand your concerns. No one's ignoring those concerns, but under the law, and that's what we have to comply with, we have to go by whatever the standards are, whether we agree with them or not. That's what we have to comply with.
And understand those standards come from the state level, not the township level.
So most of the requirements that you're referring to, they come from the state. They're regulated by the state, by your elected officials at the state. So that we don't have any control over that. And so we understand your concerns. We appreciate you expressing them for the board and for this hearing, but the applicant has produced that they are complying with what the standards are at this time, and therefore they don't have to meet anything but what the current standards are.
Okay, and I have one final question. This all is entirely contingent on getting the DEP's approval of the wetlands modifications, correct?
I think they have. Do you already have that, Mr. Cornet? Do you have the LOI?
We do. I think what you were hearing during testimony was a widening of Walton as that discussion, not the project.
Okay, so the entire project has met the DEP's wetlands approval.
They've gotten the LOI for the wetlands.
Okay.
The conversation we had about the sidewalk and the widening of the road, which is our professional's request, and based on the township ordinances, what we would like to see. That's why I asked during the hearing if the applicant would agree to apply to the DEP. And if the DEP approved that, we don't know what will happen with the DEP. If they approve that, they would comply with that request. If the DEP doesn't approve to that, then they would make the contribution or for a sidewalk, or in this case, the applicant said for the road, they would donate that land or that portion of the land that the township was talking about for widening the road, they would donate it to the town. So in the future, if DEP changes their standards and says to the township, you can now widen Walton Avenue, the township would then have that land available to them to make that improvement if it's allowed. Again, that is up to the state, and we have absolutely no control over that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Bill.
just for Mr.
Mr.
Severs.
Severs, let me just confirm, you are done with your questions at this time?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Just to address one of Mr. Severs' concerns, the township ordinance for stormwater management was just amended in March of this year. So that is the latest information that the state has advanced for stormwater management. So the original ordinance was 2006. So it does get updated. I mean, it takes time, but it was just recently updated in March of this year. So that's the current standard statewide. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Madam Chair, just one comment as far as any testimony as far as traffic off-site. And Mr. Baranowski touched on this, but I just wanted to put in for the record, and just in the Dunkin' Donuts case, it states, and this is a quote, "A planning board should consider off-site traffic flow and safety in reviewing proposals for the vehicular ingress to and egress from a site." So the testimony that's provided, the board can weigh that accordingly, according to the standards in Dunkin' Donuts. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Yeah, thanks. And Mr. Miller, to that point, I think the case is specific to the actual safety of leaving and entering the site itself, as opposed to generalized off-site traffic conditions. I think I went through a number of cases, and I can, go back through them when I give, kind of like my final statement. There's the Lionel's Appliance case that talks about a planning board being constrained from denying a site plan because of existing off-site conditions. The Dunkin' Donuts decision also references the planning board doesn't have authority to deny the site plan because of off-site traffic conditions. But to that end, the the PRB case says can condition approval of a permitted use on certain things like contributions for off-site improvements, which is what we propose here. But again, taking denial off the table. So I think we're all speaking to the same principles and concepts of law. But I think I just want to be clear also that it's not introducing a concept here that that there's any issue with regard to safe ingress and egress coming in and out of the site. That's a very kind of specific thing that case addressed.
It does, but it does also reference where the planning board should consider off-site traffic flow and safety reviewing proposals. So that I don't disagree with that portion where you talk about ingress and egress, but it does mention that as well. So I just wanted to make that clear for the record, just that the board, whatever testimony is provided, whether it be from public or other witnesses, it can take it into account accordingly, of course.
And just so the public understands, I know we talked about, is it my TDI? We talked about what they're talking about is if this application is approved, once a tenant is identified, our traffic professionals for the township and for the board would go back out. They would identify how much traffic is coming from that site, both vehicular and traffic. And then they look at all of the intersections. So as stated, they would look at Mount Laurel Road and Union Mill to see how much traffic is being put out at that intersection with the lights, to see what improvements need to be made. As you've noticed, for people who travel that route, that road was widened and there was a left turn lane put in and a straight and a turn. That came out of Bancroft's application because of the amount of traffic that would be put out onto that roadway. And the light was switched so that hopefully the traffic flow would move better because of the concerns of that. All of that is done. They'll look at Briggs Road and Union Mill. They would look at Leadenhall and Briggs as well. So they look at all those intersections after a site goes in. That would be a condition of this application if it's approved. The experts would go out and look at everything. The applicant has agreed that if the township experts go out and say, these changes need to be made, you need to stagger a light or you need to put in a light. That's been a talk for a long time at Briggs Road and Union Mill. If all of that stuff needs to be done, the applicant would be making a contribution along with other entities in that area who already have to make those improvements, to make sure the roads move as smoothly as possible. I mean, we'd all love traffic to be what it was 40 years ago, but unfortunately we just can't control that. But that's what our traffic engineer was talking about. And they were talking about if this application is approved, going out and looking at those various intersections that would be impacted so that they could determine what improvements need to be made so that they can make those adjustments. So I just want to clarify that.
Certain, in the master plan, in certain intersections have already been identified
Correct.
needing improvements. A number of years ago, these improvements were identified. A construction cost was associated with those improvements was established. Based on this site's, how many vehicles they contribute to that intersection, there's a formula in the master plan that indicates, okay, if you're contributing X amount of trips to this intersection, your contribution is X. That money goes into a fund for future improvements at those locations. Again, a number of intersections have already been identified, a number of roadway sections have already been identified. Again, if they contribute more than 25 peak hour trips to an intersection, that's when the TID kicks in, that's when the contribution starts. So that's why we're concerned that if the ITE says it's generating a certain amount of trips today, if the end user is generating more, we want to make sure the township gets the contributions that are entitled to based on the ordinance.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public, because I know we keep talking about traffic, and I want you to understand what the requirements are, what the law allows the township to do if an application is approved, and what analysis is done.
And Madam Chair, if I may just briefly, I don't want to lose this thread of the conversation that we were having, that the comments you made in regard to the comments Mr. Miller made, and that is the board, in looking at these offsite traffic impacts, again, can impose certain conditions of the type we've talked about and agree to. It can't be a generalized notion of whether or not there's some offsite existing issue, traffic's really bad in some place, that would merit like any rejection of the application. And the Pizzo-Manton case, which is a New Jersey Supreme Court case from 1994, says that and rejects a similar notion that was espoused in that Dunkin' Donuts case and the Appellate Division case from 1984, the Supreme Court in 1994. So we can't just rely on generalized notions. We can't look at offsite traffic impacts. There was the El Shire case specifically they were rejecting from 1991.
Chairwoman Conti, can we get back to the public participation, please?
Mr. Baranowski, I just want to get through this public portion because
Sure,
we
I
only
do
have
too.
about 10 minutes left.
And we have 5 people waiting.
And so I have quite a few people waiting. So I just want to keep moving through that. Again, if you're speaking from the public, if we've already touched on an issue you've touched on, I ask that you not put your hand up to speak because the response is going to be the same so that we can continue to touch on all the issues. At this point, I have Margaret Shu. If you could unmute your mic, and then our solicitor will, I'm still showing you as muted. There you go. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can.
We've got you. Okay, so our solicitor, John Miller, is going to swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Please state and spell your name and provide your address for the record.
My name is Margaret Shu. I live at 623 Union Mill, which is about 5 or 6 homes to the west of Walton.
Thank you.
I experience all the traffic bog ups that those on Walton are complaining about. There are definitely trucks, etc., going down that way. Prior to the pandemic, the traffic would back up from Mount Laurel Road all the way to Walton. It's a little bit less because of the pandemic right now, but I've done a little checking, just what the traffic lately has been. And we have at least 14 people per minute, or not people, vehicles going past my home every minute. And that's on Monday through Friday. Saturday, we have about 10, and Sunday, we have about 5. That's a lot of traffic. My concern with what's going on, and I appreciate the fact that you're trying to reroute the trucks. I don't think that it'll totally be accomplished, but at least you're trying that. But I am concerned with Fernbrook. You're talking about office space in there of 221 people. Even if that is only one shift, that's going to be well over 400 to 500 more vehicles that are going to go past my property and everybody else is in the area. That's going to bog it down. Is there any possible way that that can be rerouted like the trucks, that it has to force the traffic to come through 38 and through your other entries, just like the trucks are? And can't you put a entryway very close to where the truck entry is, forcing them to go in and out and not through the residential area that is there? That's a major problem.
They have an agreement. Fernbrook Road is a private road that's owned by Brightview, or the company that owns Brightview.
A Union Mill isn't. Union Mill is,
but
and
Union
they have
Mill
to
is
get there that way.
Union Mill is a township road. So we as a board have no, I mean, a township road, there's no way to limit the traffic. And the use of Fernbrook, if there's an agreement which the applicant has with the owner of that road, which is Brightview, we can't deny them use of that road if they have an agreement, which they do, to use that road. And the township road, we can't restrict who uses a township road. It's not a private road, it's a township road. So we have no authority to restrict who uses that road.
By opening that up, as I said, it's 400 or 500 more vehicles if it's just one shift. The fact that it's a warehouse could be 2 or 3 shifts, which would make it over 1,000, 1,500 more vehicles going past our residential area. It is a major problem. And who do we go to if not our township? Not this board has some control over what goes on, because if you can't make our life here, and I've been here 53 years, if you can't make our life here for the taxes that we pay, you know, we shouldn't approve these people to come in if you can't make it work for the rest of the residents of this township. That's all I have to say.
You have anything else, Ms. Shu, you'd like to add?
No, I just think that they should work on something else to make the private vehicles also have some control over usage by other roads other than Union Mill. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a Mr. Is it Lubnow? Lubnow? Am I saying it?
It's close, Lubinow.
Okay, so if I can have you take your hand down, so we know we've gotten to you. And then Mr. Miller will swear you in. Thank you. Don?
Did he go off camera? I'm sorry.
Oh, he's there. He just moved to the
Oh, there we
top.
go. Okay, I
Yeah.
apologize. sir.
It's hard to
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please state and spell your name for the record and provide your address.
Douglas Lubinow, Douglas Lubenow. I live at 3 Fulton Drive. I back up to Union Mill. My property is basically 80% of the land between Millstream and Walton. So we have about 200 some odd feet backing up to Union Mill Road. I've been here for 32 years. I was the original homeowner in this development. We knew something sooner or later was going in. Originally, it was supposed to be a church going in there. The Hobdanians were going to put a church there, and we figured a church would be fine, a little traffic a couple of days a week. And we've had neighbors move out because I heard other things were going to happen. My only concern is, first of all, Lisa, you asked about the buffer between Union Mill and Walton. All I heard was that the buffer was going to stay on the Walton side. I don't know about Union Mill side. I didn't hear anything about that.
It is.
The
So
Union Mill side?
that tree lineage that you see, when you're driving down Union Mill, you see that huge plot of land and then you see all those trees. That has to stay. That is part of the wetlands. So
Okay.
that's on the map. That's why I wanted them to clarify for the public so you could see. That will all stay there. And then the warehouse will sit behind that.
And everything that's been said, I mean, if it was a perfect world and the trucks are going to follow the traffic pattern they're saying, we wouldn't see much traffic, but we all know that a trucker following GPS is not going to be able to follow that. And I really respect what Terry and Steve had to say previously, because they live right there. I mean, I live right there also, and my concern is increased traffic. Bishop's Gate has been basically closed during the pandemic, but when Bishop Gate was open at rush hour, the traffic trying to pull out of Millstream, where I live, can be very difficult at times, especially if there's a curve in Union Mill Road right before you get to Millstream, and trying to pull out. You can't see the traffic even, pulling from the left-hand side. If you're trying to make a left turn, it's difficult, and you got at rush hour at night, the traffic leaving Bishopsgate and even out of Walton is nonstop, and it's extremely difficult to even get out onto the traffic. And the other concern I have is I haven't heard anything about definite hours, and is it going to be a 24-hour situation that we could have trucks going all night long in that facility, that would be a big concern. And I know people that live in an area, and this is not an Amazon warehouse, but I know people that moved in and an Amazon warehouse went in and it destroyed the neighborhood with traffic and trucks all night long flowing in and out of that Amazon warehouse. So that's my only concern, and most of it's been said, but I just want to voice because I'm right there across the street from this whole thing and wanted to, mention my concerns.
Thank you. The next person I see is Dennis Coolman. Dennis, if you could take your hand down as well, so we know that I've gotten to you. And then John Miller, our solicitor, will swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please state and spell your name for the record and provide your address.
Dennis Coleman, last name Culnan, 5 Richland Drive.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. Say that again, please.
Richland Drive.
Thank
Right
you.
off of Walton.
Thank you.
So my first question is for the traffic engineers. Just generally speaking, is there statistics on what percentage of people actually follow signs? So if there's directional signage, or speed limit signage, what percentage of people, drivers actually follow it?
If I could say, Mr. McInnes, if you could answer that, but I'd also, when you do, like you to speak to the general accepted practice of the usage of signage in connection with good
UTCD?
traffic. I'm sorry, Dennis, I was trying to ask a question to Mr. McInnes to help you answer your question. So, Mr. McInnes, if you could please discuss how signage is utilized in connection with good traffic management practices to control and regulate traffic.
I don't have statistics about the percentage of people that comply with signs in general, but I do know that signs, when well designed, they generally serve a purpose, and they're a critical tool, a critical traffic control device that we use every day in accordance with standard engineering practices.
Thank you.
Okay. And for the township, I mean, any idea on, and I'm driving at what percentage of truckers can we actually expect to follow the signs? Right. So how many trucks are you saying are coming into the facility on a daily basis, according to your study?
That information they don't have yet, because if this site is built, then they have to go out to market for a tenant. So that's why the board's traffic engineer said, if the application is approved and the site is developed and a tenant is selected, then the township professionals would have to go back out and reevaluate the situation to determine the traffic that would be going through.
In the original traffic report, they were anticipating approximately 6 trips during the AM peak hour and 5 trips during the PM peak hour. And they're trucks. And again, that's the peak hour between 7 and 9 in the morning and 4 to 6 in the afternoon.
Okay.
And so, Mr. Coleman, is it fair to ask you do you obey signs? Do you obey traffic signs? Do you obey the speed limit signs? Do you obey stop signs? I mean, that's the question.
Mr. Baranowski.
And by the way, this is what I'm happy
It's like
to
not
say.
necessary.
I'm happy to see that you berate men as well as you berate women. So that's good to see. You're an equal opportunity.
Let's just
Sure.
everybody stay off the
Chairwoman, we
negative.
have
Let's
gone-
just keep, we've
we've
hit
gone
our
past.
period. So Mr. Cullen, I just want to finish up any testimony or any comments you have, so then I can poll the board again about extending the hearing. So do you have any comments for the applicant or for questions for our board?
So I didn't really get an answer on the number of vehicles. That's the first thing. We said 6 in the AM peak, 5 in the PM peak, right?
I think you got the answer.
So we're talking about somewhere between what, 4,000 trucks coming through just during peak periods a year?
I don't
And then
understand
what
that
percentage of them are actually going to follow the signs?
math. Mr. Coleman, you're breaking up and I don't understand your math. I thought your question before was answered.
He's trying to get a total number of
It
trucks
wasn't from a-
predicated on
of
year
per
per
year.
year. So he's taking the 11 trucks during the peak, but those are just the
What-
peak hours, Mr.
What's
Cullen.
what's the
So
relevance of that?
that's not the daily, that would not be the daily. They're looking at just the peak hours. So when they do a traffic study, they look at the peak hours based on what the peak traffic hours would be. So those numbers that the board traffic engineer provided are not the total number of trucks per day. That
Okay, so
information, as far as I know, we don't have that information. That hasn't been provided to us because there's been no tenant identified. So until a tenant is identified, unless Mr. McGinnis can provide additional testimony, but I believe until a tenant would be identified if the site is developed, they don't have that information.
Madam Chair, if I might, we did project daily truck volume at 49 trucks during a weekday.
49 weekly, weekday,
Week-
49
during
a
a
day.
typical weekday, all day, yes.
So Mr. Cullen, that's what their estimate was 49 truck trips.
Okay. Okay, so, all right, so then what's that, 100 a year? Just ballpark?
Yeah, it would depend on how long they're open. Like I said, there's been no hours
My-
presented because
so-
there's no
so
tenant.
there's-
So we don't know if it's 5 days a week, 7 days a week. That information hasn't been presented to the board. There was no testimony on that. So we wouldn't be able to
Okay.
say for sure what the overall number would be per year of trips because we just, that information hasn't been provided.
Is there a fee that we can charge them to put into an operational budget to have additional police out there to ensure that the trucks are actually following the route?
As far as I know, if the trucks go down a road they're not supposed to go down, if the police are there, they would ticket. I'm sure the township manager would say that
No,
they would just,
can
I mean, they're
we,
not gonna
can
see
we
this
ask the
to the,
developer?
no, we can't ask them to pay additional fees for police officers. If the site is developed, like I said, there's been no approval on this. If the site is developed, then any signs that are put up or that are agreed to, then the police would have to, if the police are out there or enforce it, then they would write the tickets accordingly. But we can't charge a developer for additional services.
Would the developer agree to do that? So this is the question for the developer, to put a certain portion of
Mr.
money in
Coleman,
escrow.
Mr. Coleman, this is John Miller, the board solicitor. It's illegal.
We're not
Plain and
allowed
It's
to.
simple
illegal?
Can't do it.
Okay, got it. Okay, understood. And then as far as the permission from the nursing home or the senior living facility, they gave them permission to do what? To go
So
through?
they have an agreement, so they have an easement
Mhm.
agreement saying that they can use Fernbrook Lane, which is owned by Brightview. So that agreement has been made. Fernbrook Lane is a private road, and they've been given permission to use that for entrance into their facility. And so when one property owner gives rights to another property owner to use their easement, we don't have any authority to tell them they can't. So, John, is there anything more you want to say to that? I mean, that's typically
No,
the
nothing
law.
else to add, and if Mr.
Typically the law,
Baranowski-
so we don't have any authority.
Yep, and if Mr. Baranowski wishes to, that would be fine by me, but I don't see anything else to add.
I mean, a property owner has a right. So if you gave an easement to a neighbor, you have every right to do that. The township doesn't have any right to come in and tell you no.
And Lisa, just to add for clarification, I think it's for car access only, correct? Car and van access and the truck
It is,
access
that's
into
what
the
they
property.
testified
right?
this evening. So it would only be cars or vans. There will be no truck traffic on Fernbrook. They've eliminated the possibility of that with putting up the fire lane chain. So if this application were to be approved, trucks would not be able to go, they wouldn't be able to gain access to the warehouse from that. So if they even turn down there by accident, they'd have no way to enter the warehouse. It's just not possible.
Okay.
Do you have
So
any other
just
questions or comments for the board?
speaking,
Sorry, I think you're breaking up.
comment is very, very simple.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cullen, you're breaking up. You want to try again, see if we can hear
Yeah, can you hear me now or no?
No, you're breaking up.
Nope. Don't worry.
Gone.
He's done?
Yeah, he's gone.
He's gone. Okay. Mr. Chatton?
Can we get a poll from the,
I need to, yeah, I need to pull the board. So we've hit our half hour. I need to pull the board to see if they're willing to go another half hour. So I need a show of hands. Who's willing to go another half hour?
from
for
the
this year?
board?
From the board.
Madam Chair, I'm willing to go as long as, given it's a late
So-
hour, as long as our residents
Oh,
have
we
the
have to
ability.
set, we have to set times. That's what the requirement is. So we'll go another half hour. So if I can have a show of hands.
Madam Chair, I have to cut out. I got a business obligation, 6 a.m. Okay, sorry, I gotta go. All
So
right,
I need Ramesh on video.
okay. All right, thank you for all your effort. Okay, have a good night.
Ramesh,
I'm trying my best. Just, I've always had this video problem and you can hear me, right?
We can, but
Yes.
John says I need.
I'm trying to get that.
Do I have enough people, Trish, without Ramesh or no?
no.
No.
I'm gonna log off and start again. and I
John,
think
what are our, I
that'll
mean,
be
I
the
guess
best way
since
to do it.
Andrew logged off, we can't even vote, right? So we have
No,
to,
no,
add-
I'm gonna log off and log in again.
no, just let me, I just want to
at
address.
least we're gonna have to just go to the next.
Ramesh, John has to address this legally,
Yeah.
so just sit tight for a minute.
I agree. I agree with Board Member Tomsic as far as I think we have to stop now because we just don't have enough to proceed to a vote. We have to come back. We really don't have a choice at this point.
Trish, do you know what the schedule looks like for November?
I won't know until Tuesday. What else is,
So John, what's the requirement on that if we can't announce when this will be?
No, we're gonna put it on
Thank you.
November. We're gonna put this on November, Trish. The residents, this will be the third time the residents are logging into a meeting. We're gonna finish up public participation and then there needs
Ramesh
to be.
is right there.
There he
He's
is.
right there. Sorry, Meredith, didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
you're
you.
fine. All right,
John, can we
30
proceed now that Ramesh is on video?
I recommend, Madam Chair, that we carry it to the next meeting. That way we have everyone on board.
Okay.
I
So-
I wish legally there was another alternative, but I'm
Okay.
afraid with,
So I'm going to apologize to the public and to the applicant again, but I have to go with the board solicitor's recommendation. That's who provides us with our advice. So we're going to have to continue this at the November meeting. We were going to talk about this at the end of this meeting, but just so everybody's aware, there won't be another notice of this. Is that correct, John? Because who's ever on this call is being noticed now.
yes, this is for the application for Union Mill Road. The application number is
PB 2104.
2104. Thank you.
So just so everybody's aware, the November meeting is because Veterans Day is the second Thursday and the township is closed. The November meeting is for Wednesday, November 10th.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
would the vote be taken then on Wednesday on that?
It
during
would
that
be if we finish, knock on wood, that we get through the hearing. We have to finish the public portion and then bring it back to the board for a vote.
Okay, I will be out of town, but I will try to attend somehow.
It will be virtual, so the public and the applicant know. But again, I have to stress that the meeting will be on a Wednesday. It'll be Wednesday, November 10th at 7 p.m. Again, it will be this virtual Zoom platform. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of that because that is your notice.
And Madam Chair, it's absolutely right. This is the public's notice that this hearing will be carried to Wednesday, November 10th
Mhm.
2021 at 7 PM. It'll be held virtually. And if any member of the public wishes to review any of the application, they can contact Trish Hochreiter and they can review any and all portions of the application. It's on file with Trish.
Mr. Miller, Madam Chair, may I make one additional comment and request for any board members that we lost by attrition tonight through technical difficulties or otherwise? Can we have them listen to the portion of the meeting that they missed so that
Yes.
all members are eligible to
Yeah,
vote?
that's our standard policy. They'll watch they will watch this meeting. And Trish is gonna make sure that they all clear their schedules.
Thank you, Ms. Tomczyk.
Okay. John, there's no other action that we need to take at this point then?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Trish, can we make a note, though, for the public portion because of hands, that if Mr. Chatton is back on the November call, he goes next, followed by, I believe, Miss Miller had her hand up. Am I correct, Miss Miller? You can just shake your head.
And
Janice
Richard,
Miller, yes. So then I had Janice Miller, and then I had Richard Gabriele. So if you could just put them in that order as the next in public, just so when we get to the public portion, they don't get, because they've been having their hands up, and I want to make sure that we get to them first round when we come back in November.
May I make one last request, Madam Chair? I'm sorry to step on your toes. I hope you were finished speaking because
Yes.
I didn't want to lose the opportunity to say something further that, and this, I don't need members of the public contacting me to share comments in any way, shape, or form. I would just, if you would, reinforce that the comments can be directed to the township and the board. I don't need anybody like Dr. Eitner sending me messages during the meeting.
So during,
Whatever,
just so
dude.
the public is aware that any comments have to be held to the meeting. They have to be recorded. They have to be captured that way in order to be a part of the record. So we ask that you hold your comments until the November meeting if you did not have a chance to speak, so that they can be included as part of the record. And Trish, you got those names. John,
Yes,
is there
I did.
anything else that we need to do for this application at this time?
Nothing further, Madam Chair.
Just,
Thank
if I
you.
may, I apologize. I just want to make sure, how are we time constraint wise for the application's approval period?
Oh, that I'm not sure of. Have we?
Bob, are you willing to waive time constraints until the next meeting?
Mr. Petrangelo, respectfully, my client's not very keen on it, but I think the board is doing all it can, and we need the board members back who are eligible to vote to listen to the hearing. So I don't think I have much of an alternative but to extend the board's time to act through November 10th.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, this hearing will continue on Wednesday, November 10th at 7 PM via Zoom. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. For the board members who are still on the call, just a reminder, please make a note of the time. As Meredith said, since we're Zoom, I know Mr. Rathke said he would be out of town, but he's going to make every effort to be on that call. So I'm asking everyone to please make sure you can clear your schedules. Trish, if you can make sure you reach out to Andrew and Tim to make sure that they're aware of that and the importance of them being on that call so that we can continue the hearing.
That's still a 7 PM call?
Still a
Yes.
7 PM call,
Okay.
and it will still be by Zoom. So look for Trisha's email right
Okay, thank you.
for that link. Okay, any additional comments from the board or the board member as we wrap up the meeting? Okay, seeing none, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
I have a motion from Township Manager Tomacek. I have a second. Are you seconding, Mayor?
Yes.
Or you have a comment? Okay, seconding.
No, I'm
I have a-
seconding.
Okay, I have a second for Mayor Stegler. Just wanted to make sure because I went comment real quick. I didn't want to jump
okay.
back. I have a second for Mayor Stegler. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, and
Good
we'll
evening,
see you in November. Trish, for that resolution that we passed, just as normal, just email me. And I'll
Yeah,
come over on my lunch hour.
John should have them to me tomorrow, John?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, and then I'll come over on my lunch hour. Just email me. I'll come over on my lunch hour, sign that for you.